In this cursed world where the very sky is stained with blood, survival seems like an impossible dream. Taewook never sought fame for him. Every step was just a desperate attempt to survive. But in these lands, death lurks at every step, taking the most terrible forms. One wrong moment, and the carnivorous creature is already closing its deadly jaws on his hand. A searing pain pierces his body as the poisonous slime corrodes his flesh, testing his will. Gathering his last strength, he delivers the decisive blow, and the giant monster collapses to the ground. Breathing heavily, Taewook tries to come to his senses, realizing that this was only the first spark in an impending fire. Every second here costs lives, and the price of this struggle grows with every passing minute. But what opened up before his eyes ahead made Taewook's heart freeze with primal horror. Even the greatest warriors, accustomed to shedding blood, stood frozen in silent stupor in the face of impending disaster. Against the backdrop of this titanic carnage, an ordinary person seemed like just a pitiful grain of sand, carried away by the wind of war. Taewook could only silently contemplate the madness, praying that the monster's wrath would pass him by. The great hunters clashed in mortal combat with an ancient evil, shaking the very earth with their power. They rushed into battle with the fury of the doomed, hoping to snatch victory from fate itself. When the storm briefly died down, Taewook had no choice but to scavenge for scraps of strength among the fallen enemies. In his palms was an ominous purple crystal, radiating a dark, alluring energy. The trophy had come at a high price, but its cold gleam held only new threats. A sudden cry of horror breaks the silence, causing him to rush away in panic. The realization of the nightmarish reality crashes down on him, knocking the air out of his lungs. Those he had considered invincible defenders now lay lifeless on the torn earth. All hope was shattered in an instant, leaving behind only a silent void and crimson rivers. Taewook's gaze frozen in a primal terror in the face of imminent death. From the bloody mist before him rose a gigantic creature of darkness, woven from hundreds of screaming souls. His empty, faceless mask radiated only absolute contempt for the pitiful human life. Realizing that there is nowhere to run, he grabs his only weapon with a cry of despair. But the mad rush is interrupted by an instant, crushing blow that tears through the flesh. Pain blinds him, throwing him back onto the cold, blood-soaked ground. The shadow of the monster mercilessly covers him, depriving him of his last hope of salvation. An ancient evil stretches out its ghostly claws, sucking the last of his life force from his wounded body. A viscous, black filth penetrates his very essence, forcing him to choke on his own blood. In this fading moment, only one silent question beats in his mind. Is this really the end? Ghosts of the past flashed before my eyes, the car accident that took my parents, and the endless humiliations of my childhood. His whole life was a continuous series of failures, where he was given only the despicable role of a miserable porter. But the rage that had been building up deep inside for years suddenly flares up with new, furious force. As if in response to this dying rebellion, the gears of fate begin to move, activating the hidden mechanisms of the soul. The space around him cracks open, releasing colossal, previously unseen energy. Waking up in the middle of a vast cosmic ocean, he sees a shining golden staircase leading upward. Confused and shocked, Taewook can't believe his eyes as he stares into the blinding void. There, at the very top, the king awaits him, a majestic being of pure primordial light. And this sacred face marks the beginning of a completely different, great history. A gigantic dark silhouette towers over him, ready to devour his very soul. Exhausted and defeated, the young man froze in anticipation of the inevitable end. But in the empty eye sockets of the eerie mask, there is no rage, only a cold, indifferent look. And at that moment, the darkness retreats before the dazzling majesty of the king descending from the heavens. Kim Tae-hyung freezes, unable to breathe from the oppressive presence of a true deity. A light, barely perceptible smile plays on the sacred lips, carrying with it an air of inevitability. Before him, seated on a throne in the middle of endless emptiness, an earthly warrior seems like just a pitiful grain of sand. The surrounding space vibrates from an invisible force, causing the guy to tremble with fear. But the ruler declares that the unyielding will of man forced him to make his choice. Star worlds and entire galaxies begin to revolve around them in a mad dance. The warning sounds like thunder. Such a miracle will never happen again. The gates of the abyss burst open with a roar, releasing primal horror to meet a new destiny. And at this fateful moment, images of his past flash through Tae-hyung's memory, days full of pain, shame, and eternal fear of those who were stronger. The bullying and contemptuous sneers of his peers, who considered him a worthless person. This whole damn world proved to him every day his own helplessness. Then he could only endure the beatings without complaint, swallow in tears of humiliation. But right now, something completely different, frightening and alien, is lighting up deep in his pupils. The status of an insignificant F-rank hunter crumbles under the onslaught of the awakened power. And Kim Tae-hyung smiles, because now it's his turn to decide the destinies of others. The insolent grins of yesterday's tormentors no longer evoke the same fear in him. They were used to seeing him as only a submissive victim, incapable of fighting back. But when one of them rushes forward in a rage, ready to teach another cruel lesson, Kim Tae-hyung responds with a crushing blow, forever breaking the usual balance of power. The realization of reality hits their arrogance much harder than a comrade thrown to the ground. A crazy, anticipatory smile spreads across Tae-hyung's face. Through the tears of pain experienced, the true triumph of a man who has thrown off the shackles appears. On this deserted roof, the roles were reversed once and for all. Having wiped the remnants of weakness from his face, he is ready to finally deal with those who poisoned his life. The remaining opponents use all their magic, hoping to overwhelm him with numbers. However, their furious attacks seem too slow and predictable to Tae-hyung. A slight movement, and a powerful uppercut sends another insolent fellow flying deep. And then a crushing kick shatters the vaunted ice defense of the last attacker. There is no blind rage in his gaze, only cold calculation and absolute confidence. After all, behind this triumph lies not just random resources, but the awakening of true, dormant greatness within. Long hours of painstaking study of the bestiary of the abyss and the secrets of ancient manuscripts were not in vain. Years of grueling training, boxing, fencing, and shooting finally came together to form a single, deadly picture. The opponents are trying to make one last, desperate effort, refusing to believe in their defeat. But Tae-hyung had already calculated their every move, responding with a flawless series of preemptive strikes. And now they, defeated and broken, lie helplessly at the feet of the one they despised only yesterday. But for Tae-hyung, this battle was just a warm-up, and he prepared to put the finishing touches with a slight grin. His gaze, cold and penetrating, left his opponent no chance of salvation. The realization of how powerful an opponent he was facing caused the enemy to shudder with sudden alarm. Realizing that his life was at stake, he released all his mana, covering his body with an indestructible stone armor. A heavy stone fist rushed forward with a deafening whistle, carrying within it colossal destructive force. But to Tae-hyung, whose reflexes had long since surpassed human limits, this lunge seemed agonizingly slow. With one precise movement, he dodged the deadly blow, causing his opponent to miss. The enemy's face was frozen in genuine horror as his target literally vanished into thin air right in front of him. In a desperate attempt to rectify the situation, he soared upward and brought all his power back down on the roof. A powerful blow shook the entire building, raising dense clouds of dust and stone chips into the air. Finding himself in the middle of a thick curtain, the awakened one frantically tried to catch at least some presence of the enemy. However, Tae-hyung had already silently entered from the blind spot, preparing his lightning-fast response. The enemy sensed mortal danger and turned around sharply, but all he saw was the inevitable end. Tae-hyung's swift strike cut through the air, aiming straight at his opponent's stone mask. The strongest stone armor, which seemed indestructible, began to crack at the seams at that moment. The young man's fist slammed into the barrier, concentrating all his power into one crushing point. With a furious cry, Tae-hyung released the pent-up energy, causing the air around him to tremble with tension. And the vaunted protection of the stone giant shattered into thousands of tiny fragments, unable to withstand the onslaught. A powerful shockwave swept away everything in its path, finally ending this confrontation. And on the ruined roof, bathed in the setting sun, there remained only the defeated enemy, choking on his own blood and powerlessness. Go Tae-wook slowly approached his fallen opponent, watching from above as he made his pathetic attempts to rise. A triumphant grin played across his face. He was absolutely confident in the superiority of his crushing force. With each step he took, the stone armor that bound the veteran's body only grew more dense with crushing power. The wounded Kim Tae-hyung lay motionless among the rubble, seemingly having finally admitted his defeat in this unequal battle. Blood poured down his face, and his fading consciousness clung to the last shreds of his fading life. After all, in this harsh world, the gap between the lower ranks and the greatness of the S-class always seemed insurmountable. But suddenly the heavy silence of the sunset was pierced by a strange, ominous premonition, which made Go Tae-wook wary. An eerie, unnatural crimson haze began to thicken around the young man's bloody fingers. Contrary to the laws of nature, a cursed dark energy burst forth from the depths of his tormented body. In the blink of an eye, the sky split open, and a colossal column of blood-red flame engulfed the risen hunter. Go Tae-wook's unshakable confidence was instantly replaced by icy horror before this incomprehensible force. A deadly aura pulsed in the young man's hands, yearning for only one thing, the complete destruction of the enemy. Kim Tae-hyung's gaze flashed with a maddened scarlet light in which there was no longer room for mercy or fear. Realizing that there was no time to waste, Go Tae-wook, with a furious cry, launched into his last desperate attack. But to meet his crushing blow rushed the merciless, all-consuming maw of primordial chaos. The veteran's seemingly indestructible stone armor began to crumble into dust under the sheer pressure of that aura. Kim Tae-hyung delivered a single counterpunch, putting all his pent-up rage and pain into it. This attack carried within itself an undeniable will to win, sweeping away any obstacles in its path. In the blinding flash of the collision, Go Tae-wook realized the futility of his resistance in the face of a true monster, and a crushing flow of energy finally tore apart his defenses, carrying away the remnants of his pride into oblivion. The last echoes of this violent collision slowly settled, carrying with them the debris that had been thrown into the air. And just nearby, outside the windows of ordinary classrooms, the serene school life continued. But this fragile illusion of peace instantly dissipated when the sky became covered with an ominous crimson fog. Kim Tae-hyung stood in the midst of this chaos, holding back the destructive energy that was bursting out. His opponents fell one after another, unable to bear the suffocating pressure of this power. When the dust finally settled, the young man silently looked at the fallen enemy. Every breath was difficult for him, and sweat poured down his exhausted face. His hand, covered in stone growths, still throbbed with the alien power that filled it. The heavy stone fist fell, leaving behind only ruins and a ringing silence. Now that the battle was over, the wounded soldiers needed immediate rescue. The woman on duty at the school's medical center suddenly felt a shiver of anxiety run down her spine. Her worst premonitions were confirmed as soon as the door swung open and an exhausted young man appeared on the threshold. Bleeding but stubbornly remaining on his feet, Kim Tae-hyung carried the bodies of his unconscious comrades. The doctor screamed in horror, unable to comprehend what tragedy could have happened within the walls of a peaceful school. The victims were hastily placed on beds in an attempt to stabilize their critical condition. By directing streams of healing magic onto the hero's wounded body, the nurse tried to ease his suffering. However, when asked about what happened, Kim Tae-hyung simply laughed it off awkwardly, citing a banal fall down the stairs. Leaving behind the bustle of the hospital, he walked out onto the deserted evening street under the rays of the setting sun. The ominous shadow of an ancient power silently followed him, reminding him of the price he had to pay to save his loved ones. After all, no one in this world should have known the secret of a humble F-rank hunter who hides truly limitless power within himself. As he walked up the sunlit steps, Kim Tae-hyung carried the weight of his experience within him, eager to return to his normal life as quickly as possible. His gaze showed deep fatigue, but at the same time, a firm determination to preserve his fragile peace. He stopped in front of an old familiar building that had always served him as a quiet haven from the cruel world. A small, warm smile crossed his face as he thought about those who were waiting for him inside. After the death of his parents, it was his uncle and his family who became the young man's only support and most valuable treasure. However, as he opened the door, he instantly felt an icy chill of foreboding run down his spine. A sharp, unnatural noise coming from the depths of the apartment made his heart clench anxiously. Taking a step over the threshold, he froze, not believing his own eyes at the picture unfolding before him. His cousin, once a carefree and cheerful boy, was now trembling in fear under the pressure of impudent extortionists. The realization of what was happening instantly wiped the remnants of the morning peace from Tae-hyung's face. A furious spark flared in his eyes, ready to turn into a devastating fire at any second. The crumpled bills and coins scattered across the floor left no doubt about the dirty intentions of the uninvited guests. The brazen bandits turned around with displeasure at the newcomer, reveling in their own impunity and strength. They are used to taking everything they want, completely unaware of the fatal mistake they are making right now. Tae-hyung looked at them silently, and in this ringing silence, his presence filled the entire room. The gang leader walked leisurely towards him, wanting to show who was the real master of the situation. With a mocking grin, he unceremoniously extended his hand, trying to humiliate the uninvited witness. But the guy didn't even flinch, answering him with the chilling, absolutely calm gaze of a true predator. The next moment, the bandit's arrogance was replaced by a wild, unconscious horror in the face of an unknown threat. With one lightning-fast and crushing movement, Tae-hyung unleashed on the impudent man all the rage he had been trying to hide for so long. The powerful blow caused the enemy to howl in pain, losing the last remnants of his imaginary greatness. His accomplices stood frozen in shock, unable to believe their own eyes and suddenly realizing the gravity of their situation. But Tae-hyung wasn't going to stop and grabbed the instigator of this senseless fight with a death grip. He only screamed hysterically, trying to escape from the trap of superior force. With one sharp movement, the guy slammed the attacker into the floor, crushing his very will to resist. A cold, triumphant smile crossed the young man's face. He was ready to use his most sinister power. However, a system warning flashed right before his eyes, causing his heart to skip a beat for a moment. Noticing the enemy's sudden confusion, the defeated bandit froze in bewilderment, trying to understand the reason for this pause. Tae-hyung himself stared at his palms in confusion, not understanding why his trusted ability had failed at the most crucial moment. A moment of weakness cost him too much, and out of the corner of his eye he caught a glimpse of a new danger rapidly approaching. Before he could react, the young man received a powerful kick straight to his chest. The force of the impact threw him back, causing him to fall with a crash onto the cold floor. Feeling confident, the enraged leader rose to his feet, calling on his henchmen to finish him off once and for all. Hot chains materialized in the air with a whistle, ready to shackle any movements of the victim. A suffocating trail of toxic fog followed them, poisoning everything around. The leader himself released deadly spikes aimed at drawing blood from the enemy. All three deadly spells simultaneously rushed towards the defenseless target. But even under the barrage of merciless attacks, there was not a hint of defeat in Tae-hyung's gaze. A deafening explosion shook the roof of the building, engulfing the battlefield in a blinding flash. The attackers stared triumphantly into the thick curtain of smoke, confident that not a wet spot remained of their enemy. However, through the veil of dust, Cody Wood suddenly felt the air around him begin to thicken rapidly. A sharp premonition of mortal danger made him freeze in place. The next second, a crimson abyss of pure primal rage opened up right before his eyes. From this terrifying whirlwind, a dark force burst forth, ready to devour all living things in its path. In the very epicenter of the raging flames, Kim Tae-hyung stood completely unharmed, drawing strength from the chaos. Panicked, Cody Wood ran, hoping to save his life in the collapsing building. But there was no point in running from the inevitable fate. His eyes widened in horror. Like a divine punishment, Kim Tae-young fell from above, driving his opponent straight into the concrete floor slabs. A mad, frightening grin played across the winner's face, signifying absolute superiority. The devastating blow left Cody Wood with no chance, causing a cry of helpless pain to escape his chest. When the dust finally settled, Kim Tae-young looked back at his deed with cold indifference. He towered over the fallen enemy, whose arrogance was now trampled forever. His whole being radiated such grandeur that it seemed as if the darkness itself was bowing before his unwavering will. Left alone with his thoughts, the young man wondered who was behind this daring attack. There was no room for pity in his cold gaze, only icy calculation and a thirst for answers. Realizing that resistance was futile, the last surviving accomplice fell to his knees, begging for mercy. Choking with fear, he humbly begged for his life to be spared, ready to fulfill any conditions. Looking at this sight, Kim Tae-young felt only deep disgust for such a pitiful creature. The traitor's willingness to bark at the first command only confirmed the insignificance of those who dared to challenge him. But while destinies were being decided within these walls, a new, far more formidable threat loomed over the city. The messenger who arrived with a report froze in horror in the face of an irresistible force. All he could do was humbly bow his head before the one who reigned supreme within these walls. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of the city, among abandoned industrial areas, something sinister was brewing. Beyond the fences of the closed zone, where ordinary mortals were forbidden access, reality began to crack at the seams. Cody Wood arrived there in person, maintaining an icy calm in the face of impending disaster. Right in front of him, a gate opened up, held back only by a weakening protective barrier. Cody looked down on the raging chaos, as if the monster breakout was just a boring routine for him. The assistants accompanying him screamed in horror, realizing that the line between life and death had become extremely thin. A horde of nightmarish creatures fought furiously against the barrier, eager to break free. And when the barrier began to crack deeply, it became clear that it would no longer be possible to hold back the onslaught. The energy shield shattered into pieces, and an avalanche of bloodthirsty monsters rushed forward. But Cody didn't even flinch, calmly meeting the deadly threat head-on. With one swift and precise movement, he unleashed a crushing force on the attackers. A sinister glint flashed in his eyes, revealing the true nature of a ruthless predator. Slicing through the monster's flesh with surgical precision, he transformed chaos into absolute control in an instant. Meanwhile, a frightened messenger ran with all his might through the dark alleys of the city. Kim Tae-young soon joined him, realizing that there was no time to waste. Every step was difficult for them, and the cold night air burned their lungs. Out of breath from running so fast, the young man screamed desperately, trying to warn the others of the impending disaster. And at that moment, his gaze froze on what awaited them ahead, causing his heart to skip a beat. The mangled bodies of monsters lay everywhere, testifying to the recent brutal massacre. But the ensuing silence was deceptive, and the inspector, who sat down to examine the remains, immediately sensed something was wrong. A sharp premonition of disaster made him turn around in fear and look up. There, directly above their heads, the sky began to turn crimson, calling forth new nightmares. The protective barrier cracked at the seams under the furious onslaught of demons rushing out. Paralyzed with horror, the surviving hunters could only watch helplessly as their last hope was destroyed. The flesh-hungry creatures tore furiously at the cracking force field, creating breach after breach. The man's wide-open eyes reflected the awareness of the approaching catastrophe. The leader of the pack emerged from the breach, a gigantic, multi-eyed monster oozing pure murderous intent. With a deafening sound, the barrier finally shattered into pieces, opening the way for the countless horde. The victorious roar of the monster leader shook the air, announcing the beginning of a bloody feast. Blinded by horror, the man instinctively covered himself with his hands, realizing that there was nowhere left to run. A flash of unbearably bright flame momentarily consumed all his vision, burning out his retina. A devastating explosion of colossal force shook the half-destroyed building, turning all living things into ashes. The desperate cry of agony was drowned out by the resounding roar of collapsing concrete floors. Meanwhile, far away from there, Kim Tae-young and his companion ran quickly through the deserted night streets. The running partner turned around in confusion, trying to understand the reason for his comrade's sudden panic. But Kim Tae-young himself had no doubts. His intuition rarely failed him in moments of mortal danger. As soon as they turned the corner, a living stream of townspeople maddened with fear rushed towards them. Right on the heels of the fleeing people, sweeping away everything in their path, rushed an endless avalanche of ferocious creatures. In the midst of this panic, one of the fugitives almost knocked the guy down, choking with wild fear. He screamed desperately, trying to make the random person he met immediately run away from certain death. His eyes, wide with horror, reflected only the primal desire to survive at any cost. But Kim Tae-young didn't even flinch, and only his hand began to rapidly become covered with strong stone armor. At that very moment, high above the city plunging into chaos, in the cold glow of searchlights, stood the guild headquarters. Go Tai-wook stood silently by the panoramic window, watching as the metropolis was engulfed by a wave of madness. The true meaning of what was happening dawned on him too late, and the bitter realization left him frozen in a stupor. Turning around at the quiet rustle, he saw the one who had been standing behind him all this time, sharing the same pain. Cody Wood struggled to contain his emotions, his amber eyes sparkling through the welling tears of impotent rage. It was a silent tragedy for those who knew the truth but were powerless to prevent the coming catastrophe. And on the city streets, a fierce battle was already raging, where the vanguard of the monsters began to suffer their first losses. Deadly blades mercilessly cut through the flesh of the ferocious dogs, sprinkling the cold asphalt with their dark blood. Breaking through the barrier, Kim Tae-young delivered a crushing blow straight into the chest of the gigantic monster, causing it to shudder. The creature's gigantic body, unable to withstand the colossal pressure, fell backwards with a heavy crash. At this crucial moment, the young man called upon the hidden reserves of his awakening power. An ominous vortex of crimson energy swirled around him, engulfing and grinding down the enemies attacking from all sides. A confident, almost serene smile of a man who has gained absolute control over his destiny appeared on his face. He understood perfectly well that ordinary flames could not stop this avalanche of the abyss's creatures. Therefore, the time has come to use special laws of pressure that deprive the enemy of the slightest chance to maneuver. With a single impulse of will, he brought down crushing weight on the monsters, causing their bodies to crumble to dust under the influence of gravity. Kim Tae-young watched with a slight smirk as his crushing gravitational force obliterated his enemies. With such unprecedented power, he could well claim the title of the strongest, rising to the coveted S rank or even higher. But when the dust settled, an eerie silence fell over the empty and partially destroyed street. The hunter froze, suddenly feeling the approach of a new, incredibly stormy and rapid aura. At that very moment, the heavens literally split apart, and a swift silhouette fell from above, directly onto the giant monster. It was Ricky Harley's, appearing out of nowhere like a bright flash in the midst of the ensuing chaos. With a furious battle cry, he rushed into battle, filled with indomitable energy and a thirst for victory. Tae-young just watched him go in bewilderment, completely unable to understand where this crazy ally had come from. The enraged monster roared, trying to crush the intruder with its colossal fist. But Ricky didn't even think about retreating, causing the shining energy in his hands to flare up brighter and more deadly. The creature froze in shock as a blinding crosshair of purest light flashed right in front of its fanged mouth. With one precise movement, the hunter delivered a crushing blow that tore through the very flesh of the monster. A powerful column of sacred flame shot high into the sky, illuminating the entire metropolis with an unnatural glow. Tae-young could only shield his face from the rising storm, wondering if anything had survived the epicenter of this explosion. He tried to discern through the clouds of dust the consequences of this insane and overly pathetic attack. When the fog cleared, a fallen giant appeared, with a triumphant hero standing proudly on top. Ricky turned around with a satisfied, self-assured smile, clearly reveling in the effect he had produced. Tae-young silently looked at the strange dandy, whose manners only raised a lot of questions. With his palms folded in a sacred gesture, Ricky silently immersed himself in his signature silent prayer, cementing the victorious pathos. And our hero could only watch, spellbound, this absurd but incredibly impressive spectacle. A sudden rush of chilling fear gripped her body, making her hold her breath in anticipation of the inevitable. And this fear was instantly justified. In an instant, a deadly blade pierced the chest of an unsuspecting fighter. Choking on his own blood, he could only helplessly cry out an echo of his fading life. And behind him, from the clouds of smoke, the mad grin of Go Tae-wook appeared, completely consumed by a dark will. A powerful blast wave swept through the lifeless streets of the city, erasing the last hopes for a peaceful outcome. But somewhere in the silence of the abandoned shopping arcades, time seemed to slow down, sheltering the survivors from the storm. It was here, among the rows of clothes, that the young man, with fear in his eyes, bent over his unconscious companion. Her pale face and motionless body indicated that the girl's strength was at its very end. The guy's heart was pounding wildly from the realization that he was left alone with this overwhelming responsibility. Trying to find at least some way out, he frantically peered into the semi-darkness, praying for a saving miracle. And a miracle appeared in the face of Kim Tae-young, who appeared before him so suddenly, as if the air itself had woven his silhouette. At that moment, nightmares of the past flashed through the boy's memory, when monsters mercilessly took everything that was dear to him. From such a sudden influx of memories and an unexpected meeting, his voice became hoarse. But Tae-young's calm and confident gaze made him shut up, giving him a faint hope of salvation. Time was running out, and they had to act quickly before their enemies discovered their fragile refuge. A sudden flash of blinding light made the guy turn around sharply, sensing the approach of an unknown force. Only a barely noticeable tear on the cheek of the sleeping girl reminded him of who he had to stand for until the very end. As if in response to his despair, a mysterious guide appeared before him, offering him a fateful choice between life and death. However, the guide's harsh refusal destroyed all illusions, plunging the young man into the abyss of an endless nightmare. But through the bloody haze of battle, Kim Tae-young only smiled encouragingly, making it clear that the real game was just beginning. Indeed, Kim Tae-hong immediately realizes that the situation on the battlefield is rapidly getting out of control. Lee Jong-jae, seriously wounded in the chest, tries with all his might to hold back the enemy's furious onslaught. The scarred killer only mocks his resilience, marveling at how his victim is still standing. There is no trace of humanity in the monster's mad grin, only pure, primal bloodlust. Behind him, mountains of lifeless bodies of those who tried to stand in his way are already looming. Bloody madness completely consumed his mind, turning the once formidable hunter into a ruthless monster. Kim Tae-hyung understands that he cannot remain a bystander to this horrific tragedy forever. After all, every second of delay brings his wounded comrade closer to inevitable death. But despite the mortal pain, Lee Jung-jae finds the strength for one last, decisive push. A dazzling golden glow envelops his exhausted body, awakening hidden reserves. With a furious battle cry, he rushes forward, ready to put his own life on the line. Concentrating all his remaining mana, he recreates his most deadly weapon from pure light. At that very moment, the colossal, crushing force of the summoned giant materializes behind his back. The echoes of this massive collision make the entire area shake, raising tons of dust into the air. The monster's deafening roar of rage echoes throughout the shattered concrete jungle. The opponents converge in a swift and dangerous dance of death, where the slightest mistake will be fatal. An incredibly powerful blow falls to the ground, grinding everything in its path into powder. And this crushing onslaught makes even the most self-confident enemy waver in the face of superior power. Realizing that he won't see an easy victory today, the scarred madman decides to retreat temporarily. Hiding in dark alleys, he takes with him only a malicious grin and a thirst for quick revenge. But fate doesn't give Kim Tae-hyung time to catch his breath. The enemy is right in front of him again. The mad killer, grinning wildly, rushes forward, ready to tear the young man to pieces. However, Tae-hyung doesn't even think about panicking, only concentrating his inner strength even more. Deadly blades whistle through the air, aiming precisely at vital points. Every attack from the enemy breathes pure bloodlust and madness. But the lightning attack, which should have been fatal, suddenly runs into an invisible obstacle. Tae-hyung only smiles mockingly, because at the last moment his body is protected by super strong stone armor. Taking advantage of the enemy's confusion, the guy delivers a crushing kick straight into the madman's face. A powerful jolt throws the scarred killer back, forcing him to plow the shattered slabs with his soles. Spitting out blood, the psychopath looks at his opponent in surprise, not understanding who he is facing. Tae-hyung slowly walks out of the cloud of dust, as if this fight was just a walk for him. He shows his hand to the enemy, which is rapidly becoming covered with a strong layer of rock. With every move, his confidence only grows, turning a simple defense into a deadly weapon. The enraged enemy rushes into battle again, spinning his daggers in a mad dance. Tae-hyung crosses his arms with a cold heart, presenting an unbreakable stone shield in front of him. The steel collides with the ancient stone with a deafening ringing sound, striking sparks. The shockwave from their collision spreads throughout the area, destroying the remains of the pavement. A furious, endless exchange of blows begins, where speed collides with absolute power. Every movement is calculated down to the millimeter, and neither of them is willing to give up an inch of ground. Having broken the distance, the scarred madman only wheezed ominously, realizing that this fight was only just beginning. Kim Tae-hyung once again concentrates all his will, strengthening the stone armor on his hand. Behind them, colossal chaos rages, but here, among the rubble, their duel is frozen in a moment of ominous silence. Every muscle in the guy is tense to the limit, ready for any, even the most treacherous attack. The madman only smiles bloodthirstily, revealing a blade shrouded in a deadly dark aura. The air hisses as the first invisible wave of attack rushes straight at the boy. Tae-hyung manages to react, putting up an indestructible stone shield in front of himself. His gaze sharpens to the limit, trying to catch the chaotic trajectories of the enemy's movements. A powerful blow collides with his defense, creating a blinding flash of pure energy. But the enemy turns out to be incredibly fast. In a split second, he materializes right behind Tae-hyung's back. The cold steel comes down with a whistle, easily breaking through even the dense stone crust. Fresh blood spatters the battlefield, confirming that this defense is far from perfect. Tae-hyung finds himself surrounded by illusory shadows, ready to tear him to pieces from all sides at once. Dozens of furious blade strokes rain down on him, forcing him to go into deep defense. Another crushing blow sends Tae-hyung flying backwards, shaking the very ground beneath his feet. The exhausted, bleeding young man falls to his knees, convulsively trying to catch his breath. But there is no retreat. Gathering the last bits of strength, he forces his wounded body to rise again. Another frontal blow slams into his hastily restored stone fist. The shadow of the mad executioner looms over him, fueled by colossal, almost divine, demonic power. But Tae-hyung firmly plants his feet on the ground, refusing to bow his head before his inevitable death. Through the pain and drops of blood, a cheeky smile appears on his face. A true hunter never gives up without a fight. The enemy freezes in a moment of confusion, not understanding where this frightening confidence came from in the wounded youth. Trying to suppress his sudden fear, he again breaks away from the spot, rushing into a desperate attack. A mad grin distorts his face, for he still believes that his blades can end this life. But in Tae-hyung's eyes there is no longer a shadow of doubt, only cold calculation. An ominous crimson aura boils around him, releasing a primal power that has been dormant deep within. From this power, the ground underfoot begins to crack, and the space around is literally torn apart. The realization of his own helplessness appears like an icy sweat on the attacker's face. Trying in vain to regain control, the enemy inflates the remains of his mana, clenching his jaws until they crunch. He showers the young man with a hail of furious blows from all sides, turning into blurry shadows. However, Tae-young only moves his hand slightly, and the crimson threads obediently rush to protect him. At that moment, he remembers all the monsters he has swallowed on his long and thorny path. Each of them desperately tried to escape, but no one has ever escaped the true predator alive. And now this destructive force, honed in endless battles, falls upon his enemy. The enemy's unshakable confidence is finally replaced by animal terror. Tae-young's gaze, burning with a scarlet flame, delivers a final and merciless verdict. The pupils of the unfortunate man reflect only the inevitable, crushing end. The final swing of the hand is merciless, precise, and leaves no chance of salvation. A powerful blow tears through the air, putting a bold end to this protracted confrontation. When the dust settles, an eerie silence reigns over the silent metropolis once again. Among the lifeless ruins, only the defeated enemy remains, realizing too late what kind of monster he dared to fight. A tortured, bleeding fighter clings to life with his last strength, sprawled on the cold ground. But there is no time to rest, because the colossal figure of a monster, thirsting for his final destruction, inexorably grows above him. With a furious roar, the monster raises its massive fist, ready to deliver a crushing blow. A powerful blow shakes the earth, raising columns of stone chips and dust. Baring its sharp fangs, the creature triumphs, confident that not a wet spot remains of its victim. However, looking into the destroyed crater, the monster is perplexed to discover only empty debris. A roar of anger and disappointment fills the air as the prey slips away from under its nose. Behind the monster, shrouded in clouds of dust, Kim Tae-young suddenly appears, holding his wounded comrade on his shoulders. A crimson fire flashes in his eyes, and a cheeky grin plays on his lips, as if he had come to claim this battle. As the first rays of dawn cut through the twilight over the wounded city, the nightmare finally recedes. In one of the quiet houses, an elderly couple opens the door in fear and hope, afraid to see the worst. But at the door, they are met by Kim Tae-hyung, alive and well, laughing merrily in the company of his loyal friends. Tears of genuine relief and joy roll down the faces of the parents, who couldn't wait to hug their son again. Having left behind the horror they experienced, the tired but happy heroes slowly return to peaceful life. Sunlight floods the quiet green rooftops of the city blocks, bringing peace back to this exhausted world. From a bird's-eye view, it seems as if the night's disaster never happened at all. Only smartphone screens are filled with breaking headlines about the first gate breach in 10 years. News anchors are constantly talking about the sudden appearance of a never-before-seen monster, which has left everyone in shock. Meanwhile, a strict cordon is formed at the gates of the carefully guarded hospital, and in its corridors, wounded hunters slowly recover their strength, realizing that even more severe trials await them ahead. While the police unsuccessfully try to reconstruct the events by questioning the confused hospital staff, the rescued hunter loudly declares to reporters that the laurels of the savior belong to a completely different person. At the same time, among the ruins of the destroyed city, anxiety is growing because the threat has not gone away. But the culprit of the general commotion, Kim Tae-young, is just calmly studying the new notifications on his phone. Leaving the hustle and bustle behind, he heads along abandoned paths away from prying eyes. There's a confident smirk on his face. He knows exactly what he's doing. Ahead of him lies an ominous tunnel shrouded in darkness, beckoning with its unknown. Ordinary people see in such dungeons only certain death, surrounded by terrible monsters. However, for Tae-hyung, this is just another work environment that requires maximum concentration. Having prepared all the necessary elixirs and recovery potions in advance, he prepares for the dive. Making his way through the rubble of a dilapidated subway, the guy notices a strange purple glow. Overcoming a narrow crack in the wall, he penetrates step by step into the enemy's secret lair, guided only by intuition and cold calculation. But beyond the threshold, he is met by a real nightmare, a nest of terrible creatures, half human, half spiders, thirsting for fresh blood. The monsters are genuinely surprised by the audacity of a mere mortal who dared to disturb their peace. Anticipating easy prey, they are already celebrating their victory, planning to paralyze the intruder and throw a feast. Tae-young just indifferently looks at the monsters blocking his path, not giving in to panic for a second. Enraged by his cold-bloodedness, the arachnid beasts rush into a swift attack. One of them inflates its mouth, preparing to spit out a deadly clot of poisonous web, and launches a destructive purple projectile at point-blank range, but Tae-hyung doesn't even think about retreating. The small creatures grin in anticipation of easy prey, confident of their imminent victory. But Tae-hyung only smiles slightly, instantly breaking their attacks with the released dark aura. The realization of their own insignificance in the face of a true monster instantly replaces their self-confidence with chilling horror. Leaving behind his defeated enemies, he ventures deeper into a dark, abandoned railway tunnel. From the depths of this ominous passage, a powerful shock wave suddenly erupts, marking the completion of the cleansing. Meanwhile, in the very heart of the metropolis, in the association's shining skyscraper, equally important events are unfolding. Behind massive doors guarded by elite guards, a fateful conspiracy is being discussed. The assistant brings fresh coffee, trying to relieve the heavy tension hanging in the office. Opposite the management stands Go Taewook, whose presence here seems forced and full of anxiety. The seasoned veteran can't hide his excitement, realizing how dangerous a game they've started. After all, chaos is raging outside the walls of this office. Ruthless monsters are breaking into the human world, sowing death and destruction. Legendary hunters of the past once held back this onslaught, believing in the strength of their alliance and a common goal. Each of them, sparing no effort, rushed into battle, gathering together all their fury. But behind the heroes' backs, intrigues were always woven, hidden under the veil of mysterious rituals and forbidden magic. And a secret organization of informants known as the Nightwalkers has already begun sending out their ominous messages. Influential shadow leaders, hiding behind lofty ideals of balance, are preparing the ground for a new redistribution of power. Taewook feels the ground shift beneath his feet as he realizes the true scale of the betrayal that is brewing. His interlocutor only smiles condescendingly, hinting that all the pieces on the board have already been placed. The stern leader of the association bluntly states that it is too late to retreat, the choice has been made, and there is no turning back. And at that moment, a cold determination to get to the truth, no matter what the cost, flashed in Taewook's eyes. But in the darkness of the dungeons, sinister magic, sealed under the sign of flaming skulls, is already awakening. The mad executioner and his ghostly retinue desire only one thing: to shed the blood of those who dare to disturb their peace. At the same time, secret reports land on the management's desk that could completely change the balance of power in the association. The leader's assistant listens carefully to instructions, understanding that the coming changes will affect everyone. The head himself reads out harsh facts that can no longer be simply dismissed. A shadow of doubt flashes in the girl's eyes, because the scale of the conspiracy goes beyond reason. In the stifling silence of the office, the fates of hundreds of hunters who could be sent to slaughter are now being decided. The realization of the full danger of the situation makes her freeze for a moment in surprise. But a satisfied smile only spreads across the leader's face. For him, people have always been just expendable material. Meanwhile, in the very heart of the most dangerous zone, on top of a mountain of defeated monsters, sits the one no one took seriously. Kim Tae-young, a seemingly ordinary guy, calmly reports on the phone about the successful completion of the raid. Holding the purest energy crystal in his hands, he doesn't even think about the commotion his prey will cause. Yet just recently, his life seemed quite ordinary, limited only by the walls of the educational institution. While others were exhausted by training for the sake of a meager increase in strength, he moved forward through pure stubbornness. Each new dungeon became for him just another step to the top, where monsters died one after another. And now his path lies to the majestic skyscraper of the Alchemist, one of the 4 largest guilds in the country. Local appraisers are literally speechless when they see the incredible wealth brought by this simple guy. But the culprit of this chaos only looks away indifferently, tired of the excessive attention to his person. He was used to keeping to himself, preferring the silence of empty classrooms to loud fame and universal recognition. And now those who looked down on him yesterday can only whisper fearfully behind his back, feeling an invisible threat emanating from him. The noisy conversations suddenly die down, replaced by a tense, almost tangible fear of those around. Slow, confident footsteps echo down the corridor, causing everyone to step aside. Kim Tae-hyung doesn't even turn his head, his gaze is directed forward, cold and unwavering. But those who are accustomed to reign supreme within these walls do not tolerate such disregard. Loyal henchmen of the local elite immediately block his path, ready to teach the insolent man a harsh lesson. However, one confident step makes them understand that the rules of the game have changed once and for all. Ricky Harleys, lounging brazenly in his chair, watches the proceedings with a lazy grin of superiority. For him, this guy is just another toy, a pathetic loser who decided to make a name for himself. Ricky has long been accustomed to the fact that literally everyone trembles before his strength and boundless authority. Scenes from the past where Tae-young was mercilessly driven into the cold walls of alleys were still fresh in his memory. But even then, wiping the blood from his broken face, this stubborn man refused to admit his defeat. Having surrounded the defenseless victim, the gang reveled in its impunity and absolute power, and Ricky sincerely believed that he had broken his will, forcing him to forget about his self-esteem forever. But that weak and helpless young man remained far in the past, disappearing without a trace forever. A wave of pure primal rage rises from deep within Tae-hyung, demanding an immediate release. Blinded by anger, the bully rushes forward, hoping to put the upstart in his place with one blow. However, a crushing counterblow breaks the opponent's bones faster than he can cry out in pain. The defeated opponent collapses dead on the floor, leaving bloody marks on his boss's immaculate suit. Kim Tae-hyung just sits down silently at his desk, demonstrating complete indifference to what happened. And a dangerous light comes into Ricky Harless's eyes. He understands that now he faces an equal and deadly enemy. But before the flames can die down, the space around them is shaken by a new, even more powerful flash of rage. Ricky Harleys rises above the class, displaying the full force of his overwhelming superiority. However, Kim Tae-young continues to sit in his place, meeting that withering gaze without a shadow of fear. The young man only grins slightly, remaining completely unperturbed in the face of a mortal threat. But when the tension reaches its peak and destructive energy is released, ready to tear everything apart, a sudden, icy breath rushes through the air, causing the flames to instantly freeze. Yoshikawa Sarara steps in the path of the raging flames, stopping Ricky Harley's furious momentum with one movement. With her cold, piercing gaze, she instantly extinguishes a dangerous conflict, demanding order from those present. Even Kim Taehyung didn't expect such a swift intervention from this mysterious girl. After all, in front of them is not just the best student and class president, but an awakened S-class student with an incredible future. With a gentle but authoritative gesture, she makes it clear that she will not tolerate chaos in her academy. Ricky Harley's reluctantly steps back, fixing her with a searching, mocking gaze. With his usual cheeky grin, he tries to test the boundaries of what is permissible in a conversation with the Ice Queen, but her inflexibility makes even the most impudent opponent fall silent for a moment. Kim Tae-young finds himself caught between two fires, watching the clash of two powerful elements right in front of him. The look in Ricky Harley's scarlet eyes momentarily betrays his true, far from peaceful, intentions. But Yoshikawa Sarara's impeccable gaze remains stronger than any diamond, not giving in to his opponent even a step. Realizing that now is not the time for a decisive battle, Ricky only smiles condescendingly and decides to retreat temporarily. When the threat has passed, the headman turns to the main troublemaker, peering intently into his face. And this silent challenge gives rise to a new round of confrontation, where the rules of the game will henceforth be set by the strongest. The flame that flared up in Ricky Harley's hand speaks volumes about the fact that he does not intend to retreat without a fight. Yoshikawa Chirara freezes, shocked by the sudden display of such pure and aggressive magic right in the middle of the classroom. But the true test for everyone will begin today, on this fateful day that divides their lives into before and after. The tense silence of the classrooms is suddenly broken by a sharp, piercing crackle from the school loudspeaker. Students in the corridors look at each other in confusion, sensing that the upcoming announcement will change the usual order of things. An ominous omen of things to come hangs over the sun-drenched academic building. Realizing the inappropriateness of his outburst, Ricky reluctantly extinguishes the raging fire, leaving only a barely noticeable trace of warmth. His gaze becomes cold and calculating, as if he is switching to a completely different, much more important goal. Sarara immediately turns her attention to her deskmate, whose icy calm against the backdrop of the general chaos frightens her even more. A barely noticeable, triumphant grin spreads across Ricky's lips, like a man who knows the rules of this dangerous game in advance. With a casual gesture, he leaves the classroom, leaving his frightened classmates alone with a growing sense of anxiety. At that very second, a strange rustling sound is heard behind the girl, causing her to instinctively tense up. Sarara turns around sharply, expecting to see a lurking threat or a trace of alien mana. But instead, she encounters only emptiness, in which the subtle sensation of someone else's presence still hovers. The pushed-back chair seems to be the only silent proof that someone has just sat here. The calm voice of the young man, thrown out as he walked past the door, makes the headman literally freeze in surprise. She looks after him in confusion, unable to believe that an ordinary guy could move so elusively. The girl's mind frantically tries to compare the facts, but only an endless number of unanswered questions remain in her head. Meanwhile, the atmosphere of a general meeting, convened by special order of the management, thickens over the gym. And hundreds of breathless students stand frozen under the spotlights, waiting for the words that will change their destinies forever. A sudden whisper runs through the rows as someone steps onto the stage whose presence makes hearts clench with foreboding. Before hundreds of confused students, a steadfast veteran appears, surrounded by silent guards. It is Go Tae-wook, but the ominous dark aura that surrounds him suggests that the man's mind is no longer his own. With a predatory grin and a blazing, otherworldly gaze, he picks up the microphone, ready to read his verdict. In the crowd, Ricky Harley's grits his teeth in anger, mentally cursing Kim Tae-young for dragging them into this madness. A worried Yoshikawa Sarara is also restless, sensing that the coming trial will affect each of them. The rest do not yet realize the scale of the disaster, bogged down in the boredom of an ordinary school day. But the silence behind the walls of this educational institution is deceptive. The fate of a new generation is being decided right now inside it. The tension in the room grows with each passing second, creating an anxious buzz among those gathered. Finally, Go Tae-wook begins to speak, stating that today's event is directly related to what they are all so afraid of. With merciless monsters ready to burst from the depths of the dungeons and devour their fragile world, his tone becomes harsh, intolerant of objections, and depriving of any hope of salvation. These merciless words leave the crowd speechless, as reality turns out to be far more terrifying than any rumors. Only a few maintain an icy calm, seeing in the coming chaos a chance to show their true strength. By calling for silence, the speaker proclaims the beginning of a new era where only the strongest will survive. And his eyes flash with primal fury, triggering an ancient, forbidden ritual of assessment. An ominous sphere descends from the ceiling, enveloping the hall in a purple mist and carving mysterious numbers above people's heads. Like a heartless executioner, Go Tae-wook voices the terrible truth about the nature of this strange numbering. Each of those present is given a verdict that determines their place in the food chain of the coming war. But even the puppeteer himself has a shadow of doubt on his face when he sees the true potential of those standing before him. Ricky Harley's power is undeniable. His flames are capable of burning away all living things for hundreds of meters around. But even this crushing power pales in comparison to the icy calm of Yoshikawa Surara, whose potential exceeds all expectations. At this moment on stage, Go Taiwook receives a secret message directly from the association president. A tense, predatory smile appears on his face, hiding the true motives of the leadership. But the official part is interrupted when Ricky Harley's demonstratively raises his hand, attracting the attention of the entire hall. The brewing scandal leaves Go Taiwook frozen in confusion right in front of the turned-on microphone. A deafening silence hangs in the room, breaking the usual security protocol. This bold challenge puts the credibility of the entire association at risk before the eyes of the future defenders of humanity. With obvious mockery, Ricky makes a casual gesture, as if he is playing with his rivals. He is deliberately sowing chaos and discord among those who were supposed to be a united front. After all, a real nightmare awaits them ahead, where the slightest weakness will cost them their lives. The merciless monsters show no mercy, and the coming battle will be a severe test for everyone. However, Harless doesn't care at all. He continues to grin venomously, provoking those around him. A wave of mocking whispers and jeers from his supporters sweeps through the hall. Lee Jongjae silently watches the provocateur with a cold, piercing gaze. But Ricky only revels in his superiority, responding with an arrogant and condescending grin. Seeing this silent duel, Yoshikawa Surara anxiously tries to call out to Jongjae, sensing danger. But her sincere desire to help is shattered by his icy indifference and harsh, rejecting words. Burning with resentment and anger, the insulted girl quickly leaves the line under the puzzled glances of the crowd. On the podium, Go Taiwook tries to regain control of the situation, but the atmosphere in the hall is already tense. At this moment, the arrogant Ricky Harley's does not miss the chance to mock those around him, demonstrating his superiority with his whole appearance. However, Kim Tae-hyung doesn't even think about giving in to this cheap provocation, calmly responding to his contemptuous look. There is no fear or doubt in his eyes, only the cold calculation of a man who knows his true strength. And when the ancient artifact in the sky begins to awaken, releasing clouds of ominous purple energy, the young man only smiles mysteriously. Now all the attention of the hall is focused on the three main figures, frozen under the bright rays of the spotlights in the middle of the silent crowd. Watching this from above, Go Taiwook feels the situation finally spiraling out of his control. Kim Tae-hyung goes into deep concentration, preparing to reveal to the world what has been hidden in the very depths of his soul. Suddenly, the system crashes, displaying a system error about being unable to recognize the level of his colossal hidden power. Go Taiwook freezes in place in complete daze, not believing his own eyes or the readings of the instruments. Kim Tae-hyung's aura flares up so blindingly that it makes everyone present hold their breath in primal fear. Even the self-confident Ricky Harley's instantly loses his previous composure, breaking out in a cold sweat from the realization of his insignificance. With a slight, barely noticeable smile on his lips, Tae-hyung decides to finally put his impudent rival in his place. With one sharp and bold gesture, he deals a crushing blow to the favorite's pride, showing how uninteresting he is. Deeply offended, Ricky literally seethes with rage, ready to tear the insolent upstart apart right there. But the shocking truth has already been revealed, and Go Taiwook is speechless on the podium, realizing the scale of what is happening. Even the stern and seasoned high-ranking judges in the box cannot hide their deep amazement, and the beautiful Lim A-young watches with undisguised delight as this guy single-handedly rewrites the rules of the game. In the midst of deathly silence, Tae-young leaves his morally defeated rival alone with his wounded ego. Go Taiwook can only watch helplessly as all his plans for this selection fall apart. Without waiting for the official announcement of the results, Kim Tae-hyung leisurely heads towards the exit, leaving the shocked crowd behind. Kim Tae-young leaves without turning around, as if what happened here no longer concerns him. Meanwhile, the system returns an error, refusing to believe in the extraordinary performance of an ordinary guy. Only a slight grin on his face reveals that everything is going strictly according to his own plan. Go Taiwook stands frozen in mute horror, trying to comprehend the scale of the force he has just encountered. After all, behind this young man stands the king himself, the greatest being who grants absolute power. 50% of this divine power is a limit that an ordinary person simply cannot survive. But to understand how he came to this, we need to go back a few years, to the walls of a regular school. In those days when life seemed calm and his main refuge was the silence of the school library. Here, among the old books, young Tae-young spent hours trying to hide from the bustle of the outside world. But peace within these walls never lasted long for someone who seemed like an easy target to those around him. The shadows of ill-wishers fell on the pages of his books, interrupting his rare moments of solitude. The local bullies came with another warning, confident in their superiority over the quiet guy. However, Tae-young didn't even look up, continuing to leisurely turn page after page. The weakling's insolence only amused the hooligans, who were accustomed to getting everything they wanted by force. But even then, in the depths of his eyes, a cold, dangerous light was already blazing, promising trouble to those who disturbed the peace. The sudden awareness of an imminent threat finally forced the boy to tear himself away from his reading. The gang leader spoke about the most precious thing Tae-hyung had, crossing a line that should not be crossed. Having unleashed his magic, the impudent man decided to teach the obstinate bookworm a harsh lesson. The crushing blow turned the quiet hall into a war zone, destroying everything in its path. In the whirlwind of debris and dust, not only the books were buried, but also Kim Tae-young's former peaceful life. A cry of pain pierces the silence as one of the students falls victim to the merciless force. Rage clouds his vision as Kim Tae-hyung mercilessly lifts the instigator of this madness into the air. Lee Jong-jae lies unconscious on the cold floor among scattered books, a reminder of the exorbitant price of this sudden fight. His mutilated face and oozing blood only fuel the fire of vengeance smoldering inside Tae-hyung. There's no more room for doubt. Tae-hyung grabs his enemy's hand tightly, ready to unleash the hidden monster. But before he can strike, new, far more dangerous figures appear in the spacious gymnasium. Before him appear the elegant yet deadly Ricky Harless and his stern, focused partner, Go Tae-wook. Electricity crackles in the air as Go Tae-wook concentrates his crushing energy into his palm. However, instead of fear, the uninvited guests are faced with an overwhelming crimson aura boiling around the young man. Ricky Harless just stretches his lips in an anticipatory smile, genuinely intrigued by such a rare power. Tae-hyung remains unmoved, as if this ominous surge of power is a familiar thing for him. The huge hall turns into an arena where three forces stand frozen one step away from an inevitable collision. Ricky takes a lazy step forward, his hands slung casually in his pockets, displaying complete superiority. Tae-hyung responds to his arrogance only with an icy, piercing gaze from under his bangs that have fallen over his eyes. Raising his finger mockingly, the red-haired hunter begins to dictate his terms of this game. He points directly at the young man, confident that the outcome of this confrontation has long been predetermined. Ricky's own words seem so funny that he can't help but burst out laughing like crazy. His uncontrollable, wild laughter echoes through the high vaults, foreshadowing cruel fun. But the fun is cut short when the enemy makes a move that ruins all the plans of the uninvited guests. An ominous stone armor spreads across Tae-hyung's body, an undeniable sign that a true nightmare is breaking free. Tae-hyung rises to the challenge, his stone-covered hands ready for a crushing clash. Ricky Harless pauses for just a second, taking in the changed balance of power. But his surprise quickly gives way to a condescending, almost lazy grin. A mad passion flares in the hunter's eyes, and a destructive flame instantly concentrates in his palm. To prevent this battle from destroying everything around, a barrier comes into play, sealing off the battlefield. The space around them is distorted, cutting off the duelists from the outside world with an insurmountable wall. The lines of force pull the arena into a strong, insulated cocoon. The man watching this only claps his hands mockingly, anticipating the spectacle. And at that very moment, the rivals take off, rushing towards each other. Tae-hyung's stone fist rises for one single crushing blow. Ricky, engulfed in fire, flies towards him, reveling in his own power. Their collision creates a blinding flash that is ready to tear apart reality. The stone crumbles under the onslaught of the furious flame, but does not give in to the enemy even an inch, and yet Tae-hyung feels a powerful heat wave breaking through his defenses. Taking advantage of the enemy's momentary confusion, Ricky makes a lightning-fast attack. Another explosion shakes the air, raising clouds of dust and debris. Tae-hyung steps back, barely holding back a cough from the suffocating heat and the blow he took. And his opponent only grins madly, reveling in the taste of imminent victory. Flames rage everywhere, turning the battlefield into a raging ocean of fire. But in the midst of this chaos, a figure stood impassively, for whom this rage was nothing more than child's play. The enemy rushes forward, condensing the incinerating power around himself for one decisive blow. Witnesses to this confrontation can only hold their breath, knowing that the outcome will be decided in the next second. But Ricky Harless meets this insane attack with a chilling grin, as if anticipating his opponent's every move. His confidence is unshakable, and his thirst for superiority burns everything around him more powerfully than any flame. With one lightning-fast movement, he cuts through the raging flow of energy, forcing the elements to retreat. Even seasoned observers cannot hide the tension, realizing how high the stakes are in this duel. But suddenly, the air becomes heavy, and a premonition of the inevitable makes even the most cold-blooded sweat. A mad dance begins on the brink of life and death, where every movement is honed to the absolute limit. The blows rain down one after another, crushing the space and leaving no time for an extra breath. Each of them looks for a hole in the other's flawless defense, turning the fight into a pure demonstration of instincts. And so, a crushing fist breaks through the impeccable barrier, reaching its target. A powerful impulse literally crushes the enemy into the ground, causing the very walls to shake. Those around them barely have time to react to such a rapid change of forces in this chaos. A defeated Ricky Harless finds himself sprawled among the rubble, unable to immediately rise. A paralyzing spasm pierces his body, depriving him of control over his own muscles and strength. A silent scene of disbelief hangs in the air. No one expected such a crushing ending for the favorite. The dust slowly settles, revealing to the world a triumphant figure towering over the battlefield. A tired but triumphant smile plays on his face, and his hands still bear traces of the magic used. After all, the secret of this victory lay in the borrowed stone armor, capable of withstanding absolutely any pressure. And this is only a small part of his hidden arsenal, ready at any moment to dissolve its owner into a saving shadow. By sending a paralyzing nightmare upon his opponents, he instantly seizes the initiative in his protracted battle. A direct mental strike completely blocks any enemy attempts to defend themselves or escape. A powerful explosion of devastating force literally tears apart space, leaving no chance for salvation. Ricky Harley's, not expecting such a furious onslaught, chokes on a scream under a hail of crushing blows. Having broken through his opponent's defense, the young man unleashes a final, crushing blow from top to bottom. The dust gradually settles, revealing the defeated enemy lying lifeless on the rubble of the floor. The observers stand frozen in stupefaction, unable to believe the duel's swift outcome. Cold sweat breaks out on the faces of those who, just a second ago, considered the outcome of this battle a foregone conclusion. But our hero is in no hurry to relax, slowly approaching the silent body of his opponent. Ricky Harley's looks completely broken and lacks any strength to continue fighting. However, even on the very edge of the abyss, a most dangerous trump card suddenly appears in his hand. The ominous purple crystal begins to pulse with concentrated dark energy. With a furious crash, Ricky shatters the forbidden artifact, unleashing its destructive power. The realization of the enemy's utter stupidity makes the young man freeze in deep bewilderment. Indeed, from the clouds of black smoke, right behind the madman's back, a colossal figure of a flaming skeleton rises. Consumed by a thirst for revenge, Ricky Harley's merges with this nightmarish entity, ready to destroy everything around him. A sudden wave of all-consuming flame crashes down on the hero, forcing him to dodge to the limit of his abilities. From this raging hell, a terrible fiery giant is born, ready to incinerate everything in its path. The very first crushing blow shakes the space, causing the air to literally melt from the released energy. But there is no time to retreat. Gathering all his will, the guy encases his hand in the most powerful stone armor. With this crushing weapon, he rushes into the decisive battle, ready to smash the flaming monster into tiny fragments. Through the blood pouring down his face, he channels all his rage into this single, decisive swing. In response, the monster spews a colossal wave of flame, attempting to incinerate the daring enemy as it approaches. But the hero falls uncontrollably from above, breaking through the raging inferno like a punishing meteorite. The stone fist cuts through fiery whirlwinds, concentrating incredible power for one fateful touch. And at the moment of collision, a deafening explosion is heard, in which the flame crackles under the pressure of an unyielding will. The blast wave knocks the enemy off their feet, sending them flying in a devastating arc. He crashes into the wooden floor with a heavy thud, struggling to maintain his balance under the onslaught of the raging elements. But the real nightmare awakens only a moment later, when a colossal fiery giant rises from the smoke and flames. Observing this spectacle from above, the experienced witness feels a sticky fear grip his body. After all, what they see before them is the result of the release of pure energy, once contained in a perfect faceted crystal. It is the concentrated core of a monster, containing within itself the primal fury and strength of hundreds of defeated creatures. And now this primeval power unquestioningly obeys the madman, who rebels in his superiority. Not believing his own eyes, the observer peers into the blazing silhouette, realizing the scale of the threat. The raging fire grows with renewed vigor, ready to turn the entire arena into a blazing inferno. And at that moment, a cry of helpless panic in the face of an absolute, uncontrollable catastrophe bursts from the witness's chest. A blast wave of colossal power finally tears apart space, throwing away anyone who dared to get close. From the raging flames, a monster in human form is born, its flesh melting under the onslaught of primal wrath. His wounded opponent falls to his knees, choking on blood and realizing the futility of his resistance. His eyes were filled with a primal fear of someone who no longer belonged to the world of mere mortals. The merciless fire giant unleashes all its destructive fury downwards, literally trampling the enemy into the ground. A triumphant roar of madness shakes the remains of the arena, marking the final triumph of an unstoppable force. Realizing that the battle is lost, the last surviving witness tries to quickly hide in the suffocating clouds of smoke. But the ground gives way beneath his feet, opening up a deep crater right in the middle of the ruined hall. He stretches his hand upward in vain, his voice breaking in a last desperate plea for salvation. A crushing blow falls upon the unfortunate man, shattering his bones and ending any hope of escape. Thrown back by the merciless force, he falls limply backwards, finally losing touch with reality. From the clearing curtain of dust, the one who coldly meted out this justice slowly and confidently emerges. Only fragments of crushed bottles and spilled potion remain on the floor, silent witnesses to a failed triumph. Shrouded in an ominous scarlet aura, the winner only smiles madly, reveling in his newfound power. Meanwhile, far from the scene of the bloody massacre, in the heights of a majestic skyscraper, life goes on as usual. In the luxurious office of the head of the syndicate, a heavy, oppressive tension hangs in the face of the arriving subordinate. The numbers heard make even the most cold-blooded and formidable leaders shudder with deep shock and disbelief. All eyes of those present are riveted on the messenger of incredible news, standing silently before them. The assistants stand frozen in stupor, clutching folders containing incident reports in their hands. And the man himself only silently lowers his gaze, realizing that the balance of power in this world has been disrupted once and for all. The image of the greatest warrior of the past, who once became the living embodiment of an insuppressible force, comes to life again before the mind's eye. Even in her youth, she crossed the boundaries of human capabilities, causing the entire world to tremble before her devastating power. But today, her century-old record has fallen to a new monster whose incredible performance strikes fear into even seasoned masters. The doors of the meeting room slowly open, letting in a blinding light and marking the beginning of a new, unknown era. And this man, gathering all his will, takes the first step towards destiny, leading those who are ready to fight to the very end. His gaze is firm and his intentions unwavering. He no longer intends to retreat, ready to make the whole world reckon with his strength. In the eyes of his opponent, who just a moment ago was confident of his triumph, a primal, chilling horror now freezes. The realization of collapse comes too late, forcing the once proud enemy to fall helplessly to his knees before what he cannot comprehend. Indeed, right out of the void, tearing apart the very fabric of reality, the outline of a destructive crimson power begins to materialize. A terrifying fiery colossus rises from the very inferno, revealing its crushing fury to the world and marking the absolute triumph of its master. The defeated enemy can only contemplate this majestic scene in silent horror, realizing the scale of the impending threat. The fiery giant opens its mouth, preparing to unleash all its fury on its pitiful target. But the madman refuses to believe in the inevitable, unleashing his own destructive element in a desperate attempt to fight back. Through the raging flames, he directs a deadly stream of energy straight towards the unwavering youth. Losing his mind from anger and powerlessness, the enemy bursts into piercing screams, clinging to the remnants of his pride. However, the summoned colossus inexorably dives down, ready to swallow the rebel whole. Dark lightning bolts of a crushing blow pierce the space, sweeping away everything in their path. Dust settles on the ruined arena, mercilessly revealing the colossal difference in power. A cold, triumphant smile spreads across the face of the true monster, confirming his absolute superiority, and his opponent can only scream in impotent rage, burning in the flames of his own crushing defeat. The monster's deadly hand rises upward, concentrating colossal, all-consuming power. A destructive stream of pure energy falls from the sky, erasing any obstacles in its path. Crimson blades of inevitable doom rush down, closing a deadly ring around the target. His eyes, full of despair, reflect only the approach of an inevitable and cruel death. Yet just a moment ago, these quiet streets were peacefully basking in the rays of the setting sun, but a colossal explosion suddenly shatters the serenity, shaking the earth to its very foundations, leaving behind only blazing ruins, suffocating smoke, and the deathly silence of the disaster. The wounded defender lies motionless among the rubble, defeated and completely broken. The few survivors can only shudder silently in horror as they look at the scale of this tragedy. And in the midst of this ashes, the young man realizes that the world he knew is destroyed irrevocably. His comrade's body falls lifelessly onto the burning boards, leaving only a ringing silence around. The fallen defender, choking on his own blood, looks in horror at the one who committed this madness. The moment when an irresistible, crushing force mercilessly swept them away like dry leaves in the wind was still fresh in his memory. And now, amidst the smoke and ruins, rises the figure of a young man, whose cold calm is far more frightening than the fiercest flame. He looks down on his defeated enemy, showing no sign of remorse or doubt for what he has done. A terrible, insane smile spreads across his blood-stained face, revealing the abyss of his tormented mind. Amidst the crumbling, fire-engulfed walls, chilling words can be heard about how the show trial was just a bit of fun. Gathering his last bits of strength, the exhausted man desperately tries to shield his comrade lying behind him. But a primal horror grips his heart with an icy grip as soon as he meets the gaze of this merciless monster. In a doomed attempt to defend himself, he makes a final desperate lunge forward, but is met only with a cold, mocking grin. Now, basking in the rays of glory and dirty money, he celebrates his mad triumph, reveling in his own strength and power over the destinies of others. But this madness does not pass without a trace. A powerful explosion shakes the walls of the academy, turning the usual peace into a pitch-black hell of fire and smoke. Panic instantly spreads among the crowd of terrified students, as no one expected such a daring and devastating attack in broad daylight. The blue-haired girl freezes in place, unable to believe that the nightmare that is unfolding is real. She remembers very well how this maddened guy, engulfed in furious flames, destroyed everything in his path with the wild grin of a beast. Realizing that she can't hesitate for a second, she rushes forward, ignoring the frightened cries of the teachers. She is driven by only one desire, to save those who are trapped in the very epicenter of the raging elements. A wall of fire rises up ahead of her, blocking her path to the locked doors of the gym. But, gathering all her will into a fist, she breaks through the suffocating smoke and the tongues of flame devouring everything around. Her gaze burns with an unwavering determination to see the matter through to the end, no matter what the cost. However, what she sees inside makes her heart skip a beat. The instigator of chaos has already been defeated and lies lifeless on the floor. And above him, like a messenger of inevitable fate, towers that same mysterious young man with an indifferent expression on his face. In absolute silence, broken only by the crackling of the fire, she stops before the scene of brutal reprisal. The mind refuses to accept what it sees, and a new, chilling horror is born in the soul. She rushes to her wounded comrade, but her frightened gaze is still fixed on the figure who is about to leave. Breathing heavily, the guy barely holds on to the edge of consciousness, leaving her alone with terrible questions. Trying to comprehend the scale of what happened, she looks around in the hope of finding at least some answers. But all around there are only debris, ashes, and dying embers of their former peaceful school life. Left alone among the ruins, she desperately calls for help, begging them to quickly take the wounded man to the medical center. Meanwhile, the true victor silently contemplates the city in the rays of the sunset, realizing that this battle is only the beginning of his grandiose and dangerous path. Standing in the middle of an empty road in the rays of the setting sun, he can finally catch his breath after a grueling battle. But a sudden, chilling pang of fear makes him shudder, reminding him that strength always comes at a price. His mind's eye sees those who pull the strings in this world, powerful, cruel, and untouchable puppeteers. At stake is the highest power, capable of chaining even the most devoted and loving heart. Surrounded by the ghosts of the past and blades pointed at him, he realizes that there is no turning back. And despite all this pain and madness, a frightening, triumphant smile appears on his face. Each of his future rivals, hiding behind the masks of allies or open enemies, is already thirsting for his blood. Leaving the battlefield behind, he goes towards the inevitable, ready to take on any challenge or fate. However, darkness overtakes him much faster than he expected, blinding him with the harsh light of car headlights. A threatening bark comes from the darkness, heralding the arrival of those who are not used to asking twice. Heavy, confident footsteps echo along the deserted highway, making you hold your breath. Out of the twilight, surrounded by silent bodyguards, emerges a man exuding absolute power. The young man freezes face to face with a new threat, realizing that this enemy plays by completely different rules. The tension in the air becomes almost palpable, and every second of delay can now cost lives. The stranger's eyes glow with an ominous purple flame, displaying an overwhelming, crushing aura. At the same time, in a secluded and majestic mansion hidden from prying eyes, the fates of millions are being decided. There, behind closed doors, the powers that be calmly sum up the results of the completed massacre. The furious grin of the guard dogs echoes the merciless verdict about the fabulous price paid for the mistakes of others. The pitiful performer trembles on his knees before the throne of his master, not daring to even raise his eyes under the pressure of monstrous anger. Stumbling with horror, he tries to justify himself, not yet knowing that in this merciless game forgiveness cannot be earned. Hearing the chilling verdict, he freezes in complete stupor, refusing to believe his own ears. But those in power know no mercy, and the heavy hand of the ruler slowly rises to pass judgment. A decisive gesture cuts off any hope. The harsh law of the syndicate demands unconditional compensation for every mistake. Silent shadows instantly close in around the doomed, erasing the last paths of retreat and leaving only a hopeless whisper. Realizing the inevitability of retribution, the unfortunate man breaks into a piercing scream, realizing that his life is no longer worth anything. But this piercing cry is immediately cut off by a cold order, reminding us that no one was allowed to bark at the yard dogs. From the height of his throne, the master of this place looks down on what is happening with absolute contempt, shrouded in a halo of merciless flame. And at his feet, monstrous hounds of darkness are already grinning, faithfully awaiting just one wave of the hand to tear the doomed one to pieces. His frightening, sinister smile foreshadows imminent reprisal, and his burning eyes leave the victim no chance for mercy. Meanwhile, far beyond this gloomy hall, under the scarlet sunset sky, other heroes find themselves facing an inevitable and difficult confrontation. The bloodied youth balances on the edge of his abilities, while ghostly memories of his former strength only emphasize the scale of the impending catastrophe. At this critical moment, a man stands in his way whose stern and weary gaze has seen too many battles to show weakness. But despite the mortal danger, the wounded soldier only smiles bitterly, ready to accept any consequences of his choice. His allies stand in a state of anxious anticipation, horrified to realize that the situation has spiraled completely out of control. After all, right behind them, above the shaking city blocks, an ominous column of smoke is already rising, marking the inevitable beginning of a catastrophe. It is at this moment that those who are used to solving problems by force rise up before him like a wall, blocking the road in the blinding glare of headlights. But contrary to their expectations, a creepy, triumphant smile suddenly appears through the blood running down his face. This chilling grin instantly knocks the ground out from under the feet of the pursuers, causing them to freeze in place in complete confusion. The gang leader stares in shock at the enemy's silhouette, trying in vain to discern even a drop of fear in his figure. Realizing that control has been completely lost, he breaks into a furious scream, while the cold sweat on his face betrays the horror rising in his throat. The ground beneath his feet begins to shake, splitting apart from an uncontrollable surge of crushing energy. Incredible strength figures soar to the skies, revealing to the world a power that surpasses any human limits. The enemies freeze in complete stupor, unable to believe in the reality of the nightmare unfolding before their eyes. A powerful pulse of crimson aura literally cuts through the night street, causing the air around to sparkle with tension. And in the very center of this raging flame he stands, with a mad grin and a look that promises only inevitable reprisal. Transforming into a living embodiment of menace, he leaves a crowd of terrified thugs behind, letting them know that they have already lost this fight. But while destinies are being decided on deserted roads, a completely different conflict is flaring up in the windows of an ordinary residential building. The news that the boy is about to take the deadly test for a hunter's license has the effect of a bomb exploding. An angry cry of incomprehension and deep anxiety shakes the walls, while the culprit of the commotion himself continues to train imperturbably. In the friend's imagination, this madman already appears as an incomprehensible ruler on a golden throne, before whose absurd grandeur one can only humbly prostrate oneself. As if shutting himself off from the rest of the world, he continues to methodically overcome the weight of the metal, stubbornly following his own rhythm. But a sudden buzzing sound on the table makes him pause and get distracted from his usual routine. The persistent call from a faceless subscriber seems to foretell that this solitude is about to come to an end. And outside the window, above the tiled roofs of a sleepy neighborhood, invisible clouds are already gathering, signaling the beginning of a new storm. And right now, at the threshold of his house, those whose gazes are full of grim determination to disturb this fragile peace stand frozen. And that threat instantly takes on flesh when someone's throat is gripped in a merciless grip, snatching away their last desperate breath. The attackers act in a coordinated and brutal manner, like predators who have cornered their prey in these deserted heights. From under the dark mask of one of them, a mad grin emerges, leaving no chance for mercy. And in his partner's gaze, one can read a perverted pleasure from superiority and anticipation of imminent reprisal. Standing frozen on the very edge of the abyss, they look down on the city below, ready to unleash their deadly fury upon it. But self-confidence blinded the madmen, who did not expect to encounter such fierce resistance here. A sudden attack catches them off guard as one of their accomplices flies limply into the air, held in the death grip of his defender. Realizing the threat, the second assassin instantly rushes to the rescue, drawing his deadly blade. But for our hero, this is nothing more than child's play. With one precise move, he easily breaks the defense of the first enemy. Pure, primal terror flashes in the attacker's eyes as he realizes the insurmountable gap between them. And this fear instantly materializes into a crushing blow, flying straight towards the target with terrifying speed. A heavy fist completely demolishes the enemy's defense, turning his former arrogance into bloody splashes. Watching the fallen fighters go, the young man only smiles coldly at their complete incompetence and lack of experience. And behind him, a furious flame is already raging, mercilessly destroying the building and illuminating the night sky with an ominous crimson light. And the last surviving witness can only fall to his knees in helpless awe before this irresistible force. Now his fate depends entirely on the will of the winner, who dictates his harsh, uncompromising conditions. Magical shackles mercilessly bind the captive's wrists, depriving him of even the slightest thought of possible betrayal. A contract of absolute submission materializes in the young man's hands, an ancient artifact that seals the deal forever. And in the eyes of the defeated enemy, a primal horror before this unyielding, punishing will freezes. The very next day, television screens explode with breaking news about a mysterious incident and a building destroyed to the ground. And behind the scenes of this chaos, the phone begins to vibrate, foreshadowing a new round of the sinister game. Finding himself in the middle of a dark, silent forest, the survivor hastily tries to contact his mysterious patron. His breaking voice and cold sweat betray his utter despair. After all, now the rules are dictated by a completely different person. But the shadows of the past do not forgive mistakes, and from the darkness an elite mercenary strikes with lightning speed. But their new target moves beyond the limits of human perception, dodging the deadly blade with absolute ease. With a sharp, barely perceptible movement, he seizes the initiative, preparing to strike back. The force of his simple swing releases colossal energy, creating a devastating whirlwind. The sheer force of his attack sends the prepared killer flying backwards like an autumn leaf in the wind. With a crushing roar, it crashes to the ground, scattering along with fragments of broken stone. And now, in the wide-open eyes of the defeated enemy, only the primal fear of a true monster is frozen. A merciless step separates the victim from the inevitable end, when a heavy soul is raised over the face of the one who dared to challenge. The deadly steel falls into the dust with a dull thud, putting a fat, merciless end to this short confrontation. And a mad smile blossoms on the winner's face, and his crimson gaze promises only new nightmares to anyone who stands in his way. Meanwhile, far away from here, in the twilight of a bustling metropolis, a luxury car rushes through the stream of traffic, hiding behind tinted windows those who stand at the top of this world. In its silence, influential figures are already discussing the upcoming exam, designed to gather the country's strongest hunters, unaware of the monster that will soon answer their call. Breaking the silence, the phone screen in the young woman's hands lights up with an incoming call, bringing a slight smile to her face. On the other end of the line, in a secluded, luxurious office, her influential interlocutor stood frozen by the window, lost in his thoughts. The imperious man with the eye patch only chuckles condescendingly, anticipating the imminent start of the grand selection. His good-natured yet laced with irony, voice comes from the speaker as the luxury car cruises smoothly down the highway. And she just silently leans back on the leather seat, anticipating the game, the rules of which they are only just about to write. The hero's gaze instantly turns cold as soon as he hears a name that could radically change the rules of the game. Vice Principal Go Taiwook is too powerful a figure for his appearance in this story to bode well for the city plunged into darkness. But while the top brass plays its secret games, at the very bottom, among the rubble of concrete walls, others are already paying the highest price. He looks down on the site of a recent brutal massacre, trying to comprehend the scale of what happened. And looking at the wounded, barely breathing bodies of those who bore the brunt of this crushing blow, he understands the time for diplomacy is finally over. He feels something terrifying awakening inside him, causing his own body to shudder from a surge of unknown power. This destructive energy, pulsating with crimson flashes on his palm, no longer obeys the previous rules and demands an immediate release. The quiet echo of this power carries through the dark, silent alleys, which seem frozen in anticipation of the inevitable collision. In the depths of these courtyards, pressed against a broken wall, lie those whose crushing defeat seemed impossible just a few minutes ago. And when new, confident opponents emerge from the darkness, those gathered can only realize with horror the scale of the impending threat. At this critical moment, even an experienced partner loses his composure, frantically trying to find a way out of the trap. But the young fighter remains icy calm, peering into the darkness where the inevitable is approaching. Having heard an alarming message in his earpiece, he finally understands that the situation has gotten completely out of control. And while his senior comrade hastily decides to request emergency reinforcements, precious time is rapidly running out. Unwilling to retreat, the young man releases the crimson energy raging within him, preparing to take this crushing blow alone. A sinister force bursts through his palm with a crackling sound, ready to tear apart the very fabric of reality around him. But even more terrifying opponents await him ahead, creatures of the abyss, whose faces, distorted by malice, know no pity. Analyzing the situation, he realizes that behind this attack are not just monsters, but those same calculating enemies who have long been weaving their intrigue in the shadows. Having overcome a moment of weakness and the cold sweat of fear, the young man resolutely accepts the challenge, ready to fight until his last breath. Meanwhile, police forces are already beginning to gather outside the building, unaware of the deadly battle unfolding within these walls. But while the city froze in anticipation of the storm, in one of the gyms a lively young woman administrator with a smile offered everyone who wanted to fill out a form. Winking coquettishly at new visitors, she could not even imagine who exactly would cross the threshold of her establishment the next second. A young man walked into the hall with a calm and confident gait, completely ignoring the confused calls of the trainer running behind him. The girl's welcoming smile instantly turned to awkward confusion as soon as the mysterious guest handed her his pass. A golden card of special status began to shine dazzlingly in his hand, instantly changing the rules of this game and causing everyone around to hold their breath. A triumphant grin played across the young man's face, while his companion behind him tried to comprehend the scale of the madness that was unfolding. His calm, confident gaze left no doubt this guy hadn't come here to beg for mercy, but to dictate his terms. The administrator swallowed convulsively, feeling cold sweat running down her temple from the realization of WHO exactly was standing in front of her. But before the tension could reach its peak, the silence of the hall was broken by a deafening cry, announcing the arrival of a local legend. With a spectacular display of steel muscles and a dazzling smile, the unrivaled strongest himself stepped forward to greet the guests. Looming over the stunned trio, the giant instantly left them frozen in mute bewilderment at such an eccentric and assertive greeting. The entire hall froze in awe, as the guests were confronted not just by a local authority, but by the legendary terror of all newcomers, the inimitable Mr. Kang Chul. With a wide, predatory grin, the giant began to theatrically play with a mountain of steel muscles, reveling in his own superiority and stunning the guy with his wild energy. But behind this grotesque performance lurked the chilling gaze of a true monster, capable of subjugating another's will with just one squint. The realization of this primordial threat made the hero's companions retreat in horror, frantically trying to cope with the overwhelming feeling of complete helplessness. The strongman tried to regain his confidence, flexing his steel muscles and assuring everyone that they could handle any challenge. At the same time, our hero only smiled condescendingly, fully understanding that the true test was just beginning. Infected with his bold confidence, the giant let out a deafening battle cry, venting all his pent-up fear. After all, an ominous abyss awaited them ahead, where hordes of bloodthirsty demons circled in the sky, ready to tear apart any intruder. And at that very moment, a flash of blinding digital light swallowed their silhouettes, transporting the heroes to the field of this merciless battle. Trapped back-to-back in deep-dive capsules, they had irrevocably crossed the line between reality and the deadly game. At that moment, the huge hall, filled to capacity, shook with a deafening roar and cries of impatience. The first cries of shock rang out through the crowd, as the outcome of this confrontation seemed completely unpredictable. The tension in the air was at its peak, causing the spectators to exchange panicked glances and hold their breath in anticipation of the first blow. Meanwhile, amidst the system glitches and the crimson glow of the interface, he silently prepared to reveal his true power to the world. And this swift leap into the very mouth of the raging flow of energy marked the beginning of an uncompromising struggle for absolute superiority. And now, to the deafening roar of the excited crowd, the giant screen flashes with blinding neon, announcing the official start of this great game. A wild passion flares in the eyes of the first fighter, and a predatory grin spreads across his face, like someone who has come here solely for the sake of victory. Without a second's hesitation, he plunges straight into the monster-infested abyss, gathering all his might into one powerful fist. And the very first crushing blow hits the target, causing the system to flash with a bright confirmation of a perfect hit. Relying on flawless agility, he slams his foot into the ground with a thud, instantly breaking into another swift lunge. Sweeping away everything in its path, the giant links each new blow into a continuous and devastating chain of combos. His eyes flash with pure rage as his accumulated power reaches its absolute peak. A monumental explosion of energy tears through space, destroying hordes of monsters with a powerful shockwave. But right in the midst of this chaos, a silent shadow cuts through the air, ready to deliver its own verdict. Rushing into the very heart of the enemy line, he knows neither fear nor doubt. Like lightning, he soars over the battlefield, tearing apart the fabric of virtual space. His every move is imbued with crushing force, leaving his opponents no chance. And although the monsters try unsuccessfully to block his path, advancing in a solid wall, a powerful blow scatters the creatures, sending a blinding column of energy through them. A cold fire of true superiority flashes in his eyes. The remnants of the horde dissolve into thin air, powerless before this unstoppable element. The ultimate combo lights up the arena with a massive flash, causing even giant monsters to freeze. The stunned enemy gasps for breath, unable to believe what has happened. And the spectators in the stands explode with shouts of support, believing in their hero with all their hearts. Harsh trials weed out the weak on the icy peaks, where only the strongest survive. And the one who seems carefree carries on his shoulders a colossal burden of grueling training. Meanwhile, thousands of spectators from all over the country flock to the main stadium. The tense crowd froze in anticipation of a grand competition. Helicopters of reporters circle over the arena, preparing to broadcast the tournament to the whole world. After all, today the masters of the most powerful martial arts and magic will meet here. Among them is the legendary Thunderer Shin Yunbok, who commands devastating lightning, and the Mistress of Ice, capable of freezing any opponent in the blink of an eye. But while the whole city is rushing to get into the stands, a personal drama is unfolding right at the entrance. A young journalist panics when she realizes her filming location is too far away. All her plans are falling apart, and her hope of making an exclusive piece is fading before her eyes. An endless stream of people rushes past, completely oblivious to her despair. Falling helplessly onto the asphalt, the girl feels her career crumbling. But just at that moment, calm and confident steps are heard behind her. Through her tears, she cautiously looks up at the stranger who has approached. Her eyes reflect the image of a young man whose presence radiates a mysterious power. He walks past leisurely, standing out sharply against the backdrop of the panicked crowd. And on his face there was a barely noticeable, confident grin. In a frantic attempt to save her situation, the girl stretches out her hands to him in supplication. Meanwhile, the roar of the stands, signaling the start of the tournament, is already echoing across the huge stadium. But before he can step into the darkness of the arena, a call from an employee makes him freeze. He turns around only slightly, and a barely noticeable smile, full of superiority, flashes across his face. A huge crowd of participants swarms around, herded into a single enclosed room. Hundreds of fighters froze in tension, sensing that the first test would not be easy. The cold white walls compress the space, leaving no one the slightest chance of escape. Suddenly the hum dies down, and the confused glances of the participants turn upward. The blue-haired girl's voice breaks from surprise and growing anxiety. The guy reacts instantly, looking at her with cold-blooded interest. He will answer her stunned question only with a casual and slightly mocking smile. The girl looks up at him, not believing her ears and realizing the madness of what is happening. And he continues to stand calmly, keeping his hands in his pockets, as if the general panic does not concern him at all. The tension between them reaches its breaking point when giant screens flash above their heads. The entire wall turns into a single monitor, on which the silhouette of the organizer is broadcast. The leader's face, wearing dark glasses, smiles ominously, looming over the confused fighters. Participants stare at the screen, trying to comprehend the announced rules of the challenge. Without further ado, the presenter raises his hand, giving an explosive start to the first stage. And at that very second, the monolithic floor under their feet begins to move with a terrible roar. The space around is chaotically torn apart, platforms rise up and fall down, and from the screens comes the mad laughter of the manager, enjoying the chaos that has begun. Now hundreds of contenders will have to cling to life in a rapidly transforming arena. The space around collapses and rebuilds, turning the ordeal into a never-ending nightmare. Panic instantly grips the crowd as the ground shifts from under their feet, leaving the weak to their fate. And while the majority frantically search for support, the strongest contenders are already surrounding the main S-ranked target. But the girl only calmly concentrates her strength, preparing to give a crushing response. The next moment, the arena is torn apart by a colossal flash of ice, causing even experienced observers to freeze. The examiners are amazed to note the incredible surge of energy that eclipses all the others' performances. However, their attention immediately switches to another monitor, where an equally impressive spectacle unfolds. Participant number 417 effortlessly releases a blinding magical aura. Dozens of opponents instantly find themselves trapped in its energy, helplessly burning in the powerful flow. Observers understand that the selection has finally turned into a demonstration of the overwhelming power of geniuses. One of the curators eagerly flips through the lists of applicants, looking for just one specific name. He is interested in the only candidate who is capable of turning all existing arrangements upside down. He sincerely believes that Kim Tae-hyung will easily overcome this stage and live up to the high expectations. The excitement completely overwhelms the curator, who wants to see the triumphant procession of his favorite. But the broadcast of the fight with Taehyung's participation unexpectedly takes a completely different turn. The man leans forward in a daze, not believing his own eyes. With each passing moment, it dawns on him that his usual calculations have turned out to be a colossal mistake. Taehyung's opponent activates his metal skin ability and unleashes a devastating attack. But Kim Taehyung only grinned cheekily, exposing his stone armor to the attack without the slightest harm. The observer freezes in horror at the realization that this new A-class car has been brilliantly deceiving everyone from the very beginning. The shock on the inspector's face gives way to chilling understanding. Taehyung, like a predator, rushes towards his enemy. His gaze is full of mad confidence. He longs for this collision. A powerful blow shakes the walls, tearing apart the air around the arena. The recoil makes Taehyung spit out blood, but his will to win is not broken. The enemy desperately activates Iron Skin to its limit, trying to hold on. But looking into the eyes of the newcomer, he begins to realize the futility of his efforts. A crimson aura flares up around Taehyung, and his stone fist fills with crushing force. The giant launches a last, desperate attack, putting all his weight into the blow. Everything happens in the blink of an eye. Taehyung's movements are too fast for the average eye to notice. The speed of his attack literally tears apart space. A crushing blow finally breaks the enemy's strongest defense. Taehyung's gaze remains precise and cold until the very last moment. The toughest iron skin cracks and crumbles right before the eyes of the stunned enemy. The opponent collapses to the floor, exhausted, admitting his complete defeat. Taking the defeated fighter's token, Taehyung stands proudly above the arena. The observer can no longer contain his emotions and bursts into loud laughter. He screams with delight, admiring the incredible, almost monstrous strength of the newcomer. Looking at the monitor screens, the examiner realizes that he has witnessed the birth of a new genius. And Taehyung is already confidently walking further through the changing labyrinth, ready for the next challenges. The observers in the control room stand frozen in mute amazement, unable to believe their own eyes. The inspector's gaze is glued to the screen, where a duel of unimaginable audacity is unfolding. Those present cannot contain their anxiety, because the opponent who stands in Taehyung's way is mortally dangerous. A destructive electrical energy sparks in the middle of the arena, strewn with fallen bodies. It is he, the arrogant owner of dozens of other people's tokens, whose power makes everyone tremble. Looking down on him is someone this crazy monster doesn't even consider a serious opponent. But Taehyung's bloody face lights up with a cheeky, anticipatory smile. In an instant, the arena is shaken by the first destructive flash of lightning. A huge column of pure energy and upheaval of earth engulfs the platform. Taehyung dodges the devastating blasts, showing incredible reflexes. However, Thunderer only grins, directing the next deadly stream straight at the target. The deadly beams strike without fail, forcing Taehyung to maneuver at the limits of human capabilities. At this critical moment, his leg becomes covered with strong stone armor. Making a swift dash forward, the guy unleashes a crushing blow on the enemy in midair. A heavy stone boot, shrouded in lightning, reaches its target at insane speed. But even through the chaos of battle, Taehyung can feel how fast his opponent is. Thunderer easily blocks this furious attack without losing his composure. The powerful blast wave from their collision shatters the stone slabs into pieces. Taehyung is thrown back and lands heavily on the edge of the platform, breathing heavily. Now he faces one of the strongest awakened, the legendary Shin Yunbak, and this battle is just beginning. Yunbak unleashes lightning-fast power with a wicked grin, anticipating an easy kill. Deadly discharges completely cover his body, creating a virtually impenetrable barrier. The ground beneath our feet cracks and chars from the colossal stress. The wounded Taehyung understands that without key skills, breaking through such a defense will be incredibly difficult. And the opponent is just enjoying the moment, ready to unleash the next crushing blow. Taehyung's gaze widens with realization. There is no more time for doubt. Yunbak rushes forward with lightning speed, concentrating blinding energy in his hand. The most powerful attack reaches its target, forcing the young man to take on the full force of the elements. A bolt of electricity literally slams him into the stone slabs of the arena. Without giving a second to breathe, the legendary Awakened One strikes again with a swift blow. The space around detonates in a chain of cascading flashes, turning the arena into a fiery hell. Yunbak maneuvers masterfully through this chaos, completely controlling the course of the battle. With wild passion, he rushes on, reveling in his overwhelming superiority. Another collision illuminates the hall with a blinding glare of exploding lightning. The current runs through Taehyung's entire body, causing him to scream in unbearable pain. Laughing at his opponent, Yunbak rushes back into battle, demanding a real fight. Overcoming the torment, Taehyung clenches his teeth and covers his hand with a powerful layer of stone armor. Forming a giant stone fist, he makes a desperate lunge from above. However, Yunbak's lightning strike instantly destroys the stronghold, turning it into dust. The shockwave knocks Taehyung off his feet, sending him crashing to the opposite end of the hall. Barely able to stay on his feet after the crushing wave, Taehyung quickly takes a defensive stance. However, Yunbak has no intention of giving him time to breathe. Covered in blinding lightning, he soars upward, preparing to unleash his full power. Concentrating the electric discharge in his palm, he mercilessly aims the blow straight at his opponent. Seeing the storm approaching, Taehyung grits his teeth and prepares to accept the inevitable. The next moment, a colossal flash of azure energy shakes the arena. A powerful discharge crushes the stone, exploding the surrounding area to its very foundations. Through the thick dust and electrical sparks, Yoonbok peers intently at the impact site. Laughing madly, he rejoices at the thought that he has finally met someone resilient. An excited grin plays on his face, because this fight exceeds all his expectations. Until now, absolutely all the other participants had simply fled from him in horror, and he was sincerely convinced that the only one who could entertain him during this exam would be Lim A-young. Driven by battle lust, Yoonbok unleashes even more electrical power. However, right through the raging discharge, an ice projectile rushes at incredible speed. A precise and accurate blow lands right on the head, causing Yoonbok to throw his head back in shock. Blood spurts from his cut forehead, and for the first time, real shock appears on the face of the self-confident fighter. Taking advantage of the enemy's confusion, Taehyung rushes forward right on a piece of ice. He puts all his determination and accumulated strength into one lightning-fast attack. Taehyung's crushing fist breaks through the lightning shield and crashes into his opponent's body with a roar. Yoonbok coughs up blood, shuddering as he realizes that this unexpected counterattack was delivered with truly deadly force. The destructive power of this blow is capable of overcoming even absolute defense, going far beyond human capabilities. The surrounding space begins to collapse, turning into a vortex of debris and pure energy. Virtual reality is bursting at the seams, unable to withstand the extreme pressure generated by this furious battle. Thrown back by the blast, Taehyung floats in the air, causing the defeated enemy to look up in horror. A confident grin plays on the young man's face. He understands perfectly well that he has completely seized the initiative. Yoonbok, choking on his own blood, tries with all his might to express all his pent-up anger. His furious cry of impotent resentment is drowned out by the roar of the arena's continuing destruction. But Taehyung doesn't intend to give his opponent any chance to catch his breath and makes a swift final dive. The crushing onslaught finally breaks Yoonbok's resistance, sending him into a deep knockout. Taehyung breathes a sigh of relief because the difficult battle against a superior enemy is finally over. A powerful explosion rocks the test site, sending up clouds of dust before the eyes of astonished spectators. The observers in the control room are stunned by the incredible triumph of a mere C rank over a recognized genius, unable to believe their eyes. Even seasoned examiners admit that this cheeky newcomer can make them nervous, but his superiority is now undeniable. However, their faces immediately become serious, because this victory could attract unnecessary attention. Taehyung calmly approaches the fallen enemy and collects the gold tokens scattered across the stone slabs. Holding the long-awaited trophies in his hands, he celebrates his triumphant victory, because now all the badges belong to him. But before he can relax, the air around him suddenly cools, and an ominous chill begins to spread across the ground. Reflexively jumping back, the boy is surprised to realize that the arena is rapidly being covered in solid ice. A giant frost seal flares up in the sky, heralding the emergence of a new, even more formidable force. A chilling wave covers the entire hall, forcing Taehyung to once again take a fighting stance in the face of an unknown danger. The frost sphere expands rapidly, engulfing the protective cube in a thick crust of permafrost. Taehyung watches in a daze as the space around him becomes shrouded in an overwhelming cold. The ice magic thickens with each passing second, turning the entire hall into a monolithic ice shell. Giant snow runes crystallize in the air, emitting colossal elemental magic. Looking around, the guy tries to discern the source of this all-consuming cold. At this moment, an uninvited guest smoothly descends straight down the sheer ice wall. A girl in a school uniform with the number 113 emerges confidently from the clouds of frosty steam. Taehyung's wounded and exhausted face shows extreme surprise at the sight of his new opponent. The chilling presence of the stranger literally paralyzes the air in the entire room. Her eyes flash with a blinding light, and her body is covered in a thick blanket of frosty aura. Taehyung frantically tries to understand how long it has been since she watched his previous fight. However, the course of events itself leaves him no time to think. The girl moves her lips slightly, activating instant freezing magic. The guy only has time to ask in bewilderment about the reasons for this sudden aggression. As she immediately stretches her hand forward, directing a destructive stream at him, Taehyung's pupils narrow as he realizes the next blow is meant for him. A powerful wave of icy energy thunders towards him across the cracked ground. Frost seals bloom in the sky, thickening the flow of ice shards. The floor beneath your feet explodes into thousands of spiky crystals, turning the arena into a deadly trap. Only thanks to his lightning-fast reaction does Taehyung manage to jump back, dodging a direct attack. But the opponent's attack does not stop there, forcing him to give it his all. The girl quickly soars into the air, ready to unleash the full power of her elemental gift. The shockwave knocks Taehyung off his feet, causing him to gulp in the freezing air through the pain. The rival shouts accusations, recalling past grievances and not hiding her anger. Deadly blades of ice fly from her hands, flying swiftly straight towards the target. The guy struggles to block the incessant flow of damaging energy. A colossal clot of magic is concentrated in her palms, into which she puts all her desire to avenge her injured comrades. A giant block of ice rises from the ground, knocking Taehyung off his feet. Helplessly losing his balance, he falls back onto the frostbound field. An explosion of ice fragments shake the entire space around, covering the arena with a dense shroud. Looking back at her defeated opponent, the girl coldly reminds us of those who are still lying in the hospital. For her, this fight is the only way to restore justice with her own hands. Taehyung lies helplessly on the icy crust, seemingly completely broken. However, the girl suddenly freezes, feeling the tension around her increase again. Her pupils narrow in shock at the realization. Tortured and bloodied, Taehyung, despite everything, begins to slowly rise to his feet. She can't believe her own eyes, because no one should have been able to withstand such a blow. From his lips come barbed words that ridicule all her noble motives. With a wounded face and a defiant grin, the guy makes it clear that this fight is far from over. And her previous confidence instantly crumbles before his unbreakable will. Her hand clenches, concentrating an incredible amount of pure energy. A massive ice hammer, the embodiment of her crushing power, rises up, ready to crush her opponent into dust. With a furious cry, she puts all her remaining strength into this decisive attack. But the guy, despite the ice storm raging around him, continues to stand firmly on his feet. There is not a shadow of fear on his wounded face, only absolute composure. The stone armor on his arms begins to crumble, releasing the true power that had been hidden until this moment. Space is pierced by deadly flashes, flying in all directions at breakneck speed. At that moment, the internal shackles that held him to his limits shatter into pieces with a roar. The unleashed monster within him awakens, causing the boy to let out a furious, primal roar. He makes a lightning-fast dash straight through the raging hurricane, closing the distance. There is only one goal burning in his eyes, to win at any cost. The girl brings down her colossal hammer, trying to crush her impudent opponent. The entire arena is instantly enveloped in a giant sphere of ice, concentrating destructive power. But this sphere cannot withstand the monstrous pressure from within and explodes into millions of pieces. The spectators in the stands freeze in horror, not believing their own eyes. The mentor, in a panic, shouts out his student's name, sensing a catastrophe. His gaze is fixed on the center of the arena, where something unthinkable is unfolding. The rest of us present can only silently watch the outcome of this crazy duel. As the dust begins to settle, a terrible deep crater opens up in the very center of the platform. And among these ruins, defeated by her own strength, lies the one who considered herself invincible. Dazed and wounded, she finds herself pinned to the cold ground, never having time to realize how much she has failed. The next moment, the guy covers her lips with his, depriving her of any opportunity to pronounce the spell. Her frozen gaze reveals only extreme astonishment and growing panic. After all, just a moment before, she had been furiously forcing him to retreat under the onslaught of an icy hammer. A blind thirst for reprisal raged in her eyes, leaving no room for doubt. Each of her crushing blows threatened to turn everything around into dust and small crumbs. However, in the midst of the rising snowstorm, she momentarily lost sight of the young man. An uneasy premonition made her raise her head to the heavens. Taking advantage of the momentary confusion, the guy fell on her from above like a swift shadow. Through the pain and the blood that blurred his vision, he was ready to carry out his one daring plan. Contrary to all the opponent's expectations, the fatal contact occurred at the very epicenter of the collision. The unexpected kiss plunged her into deep shock, instantly knocking all her fighting spirit out of her system. Through this unthinkable technique, a powerful impulse of special magic rushed into her body. The intertwined fingers captured the transmission of the curse that bound every cell of her body. A crushing fall onto the ice finally sapped the strength of the arena's recent ruler. The ability's secret effect worked at full power, breaking through any mental defense. The exhausted young man fell to the side, while the girl lay helplessly sprawled on the cold snow. System notifications dryly confirmed that paralysis had completely crippled her ability to move. Breathing heavily and wiping his broken lips, the boy could hardly believe that his risky stunt had succeeded. But the triumph of the moment is immediately interrupted by a sudden roar, causing him to instantly become wary. The arena's massive stone cube literally shatters into pieces, filling the air with thick dust and debris. The test is completed, and the destroyed block gradually fades into the ruins of virtual space. Meanwhile, in the medical bay, healers are struggling to heal the wounds of exhausted soldiers. The results board lights up with photographs of those who managed to pass this brutal test. The names of those who passed appear one after another before the crowd, causing everyone to hold their breath. One candidate walks confidently along the wall of results, clearly pleased with his success. Behind his back, people immediately start whispering about the incredible skills he demonstrated. Watching what is happening, our hero only thoughtfully looks at his hands, thinking about his new skill. But a sudden sense of danger makes him freeze in place. Amidst the bright flashes of lightning, a clot of pure electrical energy appears right in front of him. Jumping out from the shadows, Yunbak, without giving a second to breathe, unleashes all his power on the hero. His eyes are blazing with madness, and his face is distorted by the malicious grin of a fighter thirsting for revenge. A powerful blast wave shakes the corridor, capturing the eyes of everyone present on the unexpected duel. The surrounding people immediately explode with shouts, encouraging the attacker and expecting a spectacular reprisal. Having absorbed the energy of the crowd, Yunbak, with a wild roar, goes on the attack again, enveloped in crackling discharges. An electrical storm completely floods the passage, ready to incinerate everything in its path. However, the guy only shakes his head with a slight grin, amazed at someone else's madness. The opponent rushes towards him blindly, completely confident in his undeniable superiority. His grin widens as he gets within arm's reach of his target. And only at the very last moment does the guy notice how a completely different aura begins to thicken around them. The air above the arena instantly becomes heavier, tearing apart space with a powerful gravitational wave. An invisible, colossal force crashes down, literally crushing everything around it into the floor. The attacker realizes with horror that his body is frozen and he cannot even take a step. To the groans of the fallen fighters, a tall man slowly approaches them. Each of his steps echoes heavily, emphasizing his complete control over the situation. The guy freezes in shock, recognizing something completely incredible in this overwhelming aura. The man in glasses only grins mysteriously as smoky energy swirls around his hand. He continues to leisurely close the distance, causing those around him to gasp with tension. Extending his hand forward, he begins to form a concentrated spell. The clot of mana in his palm turns into a vibrating ball of enormous density. The guy pushes against the cracked concrete with all his might, trying to support the weight. The teeth are clenched to the point of crunching, and sweat is streaming down the face from the insane tension. The mysterious stranger only adds fuel to the fire, preparing to deal a crushing blow. The sphere flares with a blinding light, ready to burst out and burn everything in front of it. But at the most crucial moment, a strange call suddenly makes him freeze. Medical staff rush into the destroyed hall, shocked by the chaos they see. The doctor, without hesitation, grabs the man by the arm, scolding him for exceeding his authority. The crushing pressure instantly disappears, allowing the boy to catch his breath again. The once tense arena turns into a scene of everyday reprimand among dozens of unconscious bodies. And the guy remains standing, barely realizing how close he was to death. The blue-haired instructor just looks ahead mysteriously, clearly thinking about his next step. A sly, meaningful grin appears on his lips for a moment. Suddenly, someone's hand lands sharply on the shoulder of the stunned young man. The examiner walks away with a smile, leaving the guy alone among his defeated opponents. The young man turns around to watch him leave, still not believing what is happening. And the cheerful organizers simply rush away, completing the first stage. Soon, all those who pass the selection are gathered in a dense forest in front of a huge site. The crowd of candidates looks around nervously, unsure of what to expect. When the instructor steps onto the stage, spatial gates begin to unfold right around him. With a languid grin, he announces the start of the next stage of testing. It's about the fight for official hunting licenses that leaves everyone speechless in shock. The instructor's voice thunders throughout the clearing while the portal's magic pulsates behind him. The faces of most newcomers immediately show horror at the impending threat. They are about to go straight into the dark abode of terrible monsters. The presenter clearly lays out the evaluation criteria, from combat skills and wisdom to the ability to work in a team. Having received real weapons and equipment, the candidates begin to understand the reality of what is happening. Among hundreds of confused participants, the guy stands out for his composure. Understanding the intricacies of D-class dungeon evaluation gives him a significant advantage. There is no longer a shadow of doubt in his gaze, only a firm determination to win. After all, the real test is just beginning, and the abyss is already ready to swallow up the weak. Stepping boldly through the shimmering rift, he casts aside unnecessary thoughts about the past. The only thing that matters now is to survive the coming test. Once on the other side of the gate, the young man is immediately immersed in the oppressive atmosphere of the dungeon. Ahead of him, a group of researchers led by a very unusual man awaits him. This mysterious man with glasses acts as if he is in complete control of everything that is happening. Our hero's senses instantly sharpen, sensing the danger lurking around him. And their fears are justified. A horde of terrible stone monsters attacks them from the darkness. Squad members immediately take up the fight, putting up shields and activating combat skills. Wave after wave of crushing blows shakes the stone vaults of the cave. The companions work in concert, repelling every attacking creature in their path. Suddenly, the loud clap of the leader's hands echoes throughout the hall. With his intervention, he instantly stops the fight and attracts the attention of the fighters. With feigned delight, the man praises the newcomers for their perseverance. The other adventurers breathe a sigh of relief, succumbing to his false charm. But the protagonist is not so easily lulled by sweet words. His anxiety only grows. The young man's attentive gaze is drawn to the strange artifact shining on the leader's finger. The gemstone in the ring glowed an ominous scarlet light, radiating dark power. Observing how the group blindly trusted their leader, the hero remains on guard. No matter the cost, he can't let them uncover the secret of Apocalypto. And at that moment, the tension in the air makes the squad turn around in confusion. An ominous purple hum hovers beneath the dark vaults of the cave, causing the squad to freeze in anxious anticipation. The manager only addresses his player with a smirk, making it clear that he sets the rules here. Before he can announce the majority's decision, Taehyung seizes the initiative. To the general amazement of the group, the boy rushes as fast as he can into the depths of the dark tunnel. The enraged host shouts after him, demanding that he return immediately, but Taehyung cannot be stopped. The excited smile on his face reveals that this daring maneuver was thought out down to the last detail. He laughs and urges the squad on, enticing them to follow him directly. Running down the steep slope, he easily carries everyone along with him, leaving the confused management with nothing. His only goal is to personally uncover the secret of Apocalypto before anyone else. In his eyes burns a flame of mad determination and readiness to go to the very end. But suddenly the ancient hall is illuminated by a blinding crimson glow, accompanied by a deafening roar. A colossal energy vortex begins to unfold right in the cave space. The dumbfounded adventurers realized with undisguised shock that a new passage had opened up before them. A terrible guess instantly pierces Taehyung's consciousness. This is the legendary Double Dungeon. The majestic and dangerous gates pulse with pure, uncontrollable magical power. The unwary satellites panic and try to regroup in the face of a huge threat. The chaos that erupts causes everyone to freeze as the roar of the awakening portal fills the cave. Even Taehyung himself didn't expect that the hidden layer of reality would be so unpredictable, and only the mysterious observer remains absolutely unperturbed amidst the general confusion and scarlet haze. His barely perceptible smile hints that even this unexpected turn of events fits perfectly into his plan. The guy is instantly overcome by a sticky feeling of anxiety because the situation around him is taking a very suspicious turn. But before he can even voice his doubts, he is unceremoniously interrupted. The man in glasses raises his finger with an arrogant look, demonstrating complete superiority with his whole appearance. He strides resolutely towards the pulsating rift, ignoring any warnings, loudly declaring to the entire squad that the anomaly is absolutely safe and there is no reason to panic, and that such a rare opportunity cannot be missed because of other people's stupid fears. The young man tries to stop him, fully understanding how dangerous such negligence is. However, the mustachioed man only squints mockingly in response to attempts to stop him from taking a rash step. He publicly points his finger at the guy, accusing him of being overly insolent and arrogant. The rest of the squad immediately pick up on this reproach, unleashing a storm of anger on the young man. Finding himself under the harsh pressure of the crowd, the guy feels helplessness squeezing his chest. The squad stands united behind their leader, ready to step blindly into the unknown. In desperation, the boy tries to shout over them, appealing to common sense one last time. But the man only snaps his fingers dismissively, activating the magical anomaly. The boy's pupils dilate in horror as a blinding light flashes before his eyes. The cave is torn apart by a colossal release of uncontrollable and pure energy. A crushing impulse instantly distorts the space around, consuming the entire squad. The boy freezes in shock as he watches the death trap finally close. Even the most self-confident leader freezes in surprise, realizing that he has lost control. And now everyone realizes with horror that they have found themselves in a dungeon of a completely different, deadly level. Red light floods the majestic hall, turning the gigantic throne room into a death trap. At the center of this madness stands an ancient statue, shrouded in clouds of thick smoke and an ominous aura. The stone figure with the frozen sword seems to guard the primordial power sealed here. The hunters realize the terrible truth. The threat they face is beyond the pale of ordinary rank. But through the gathering panic, someone's desperate command to prepare for battle is heard. Each of those present felt a cold sweat running down their backs from sticky fear. From the Vale of Dust step the living guards, dark knights with flaming crystals in their chests. Their steps echo heavily, and their swords are ready to devour the souls of lost guests. The looming atmosphere of horror paralyzes the squad, not even allowing them to breathe. Even an experienced leader cannot hide his trembling when looking at the invincible monsters. The air trembled with inhuman power, forcing him to take a step back. The next moment, the guards rush into a deadly attack with incredible speed. An incredible impulse of force cuts through space, leaving no time for reflection. A powerful blow nearly tears the squad apart, destroying the stone floor beneath their feet. Pulling himself together, the leader immediately raises his hands and activates a protective spell. A flash of magic instantly engulfs the space, summoning columns of devouring flame. Fiery stakes pierce the armor of the terrifying knights trying to break through to the hunters. But from the flames comes only a dull, rolling roar. The monsters haven't even slowed their pace. Realizing that the only chance to survive is to fight together, the entire team prepares their skills. With a desperate cry, they rush into battle, putting all their strength into this decisive attack. A combined stream of magic and destructive spells crushes the enemy's defenses. A blinding flash of light illuminates every corner of the ancient hall, tearing apart the darkness. The final, swift attack pierces through the monster's last defense. The demonic creature cannot withstand such pressure and crumbles into thousands of pieces. As the dust from the explosion gradually settles, a timid smile appears on the hunters' faces. They can hardly believe what's happening. They actually managed to defeat an A-rank monster. A sincere cry of joy bursts from the chest, marking the long-awaited victory. However, the euphoria instantly evaporates when a heavy rumble makes everyone freeze convulsively. From the clouds of bloody fog, new menacing figures emerge directly towards them. Guards clad in ancient armor confidently strode forward, instilling a chilling terror. Their eyes glow with an ominous light, and the purple runes on their chests pulse with magic. The hunters look at them with undisguised shock, feeling their strength finally leaving them. The monster's footsteps sound ever closer, echoing throughout the room. These demonic creatures seem to know neither pain nor fatigue. Growing panic grips the squad, depriving them of their last hope of salvation. The exhausted heroes can barely stand on their feet among previously defeated enemies, realizing with horror that the next blow could be their last. The arena round is sprinkled with traces of battle, but the onslaught of darkness is only gaining strength. The experienced magician only clenches his teeth in helplessness, realizing the hopelessness of the situation. After all, as soon as they destroy one enemy, a whole army appears from the depths. Surrounded by wounded comrades, they realize that their strength is running out and the enemy outnumbers them. Every breath the fighters take is a huge effort, and in their eyes one can only see resignation to their imminent death. But in the midst of this chaos and piles of rubble, someone they didn't expect to see suddenly appears. The young warrior stands with unshakable calm, as if death itself could not shake his confidence. The experienced magician freezes, not believing his own eyes and trying to understand where this sudden help came from. Sensing the incredible presence of an ancient force bound by chains behind the young man, the allies freeze in awe. The mage's face reflects utter bewilderment, because the aura emanating from the guy suppresses the will of even the most resilient monsters. But the mysterious savior has no time for empty talk. His gaze is directed deep into the enemy ranks. The eyes of the survivors are riveted on him, and in their hearts, despite everything, the spark of fading hope is rekindled. Taking a step forward, the young man calmly takes hold of the hilt of the colossal sword left behind by the fallen giant. His fingers grip the cold steel with such force that the weapon itself begins to respond to the maddening surge of his energy. With one powerful jerk, he soars high into the air, rushing towards the imminent threat. From a bird's eye view, the guy pounces on the orderly ranks of stone guards, ready to crush their defenses. The crushing blow generates a powerful blast wave that causes the ancient walls of the dungeon to shake. Enemies who had known no fear or doubt were frozen for the first time in their lives in mute horror before an unprecedented force. Under the pressure of the furious attack, the ground beneath their feet instantly splits, turning into dust and small fragments. Without giving the enemy time to recover, the warrior makes a rapid turn in the air, entering a new trajectory for a deadly strike. His crushing attack catches the stone soldiers off guard, causing them to drop their useless weapons from their lifeless hands. With a furious grin and utmost concentration, he puts all his will into the next decisive move, and a colossal stream of energy, bursting from his blade, rushes straight to the heart of the giant towering in the darkness. The guardian's mighty figure freezes for a moment, completely engulfed in a crimson glow, and the next moment a crushing blow tears through his dense embodiment, causing the space around him to shudder. Without giving his enemies a second to breathe, the young man instantly switches to the remaining phantom warriors closing the ring. His movements are swift and precise, one swing after another cutting through silhouettes, turning them into sparkling smoke. Bright cracks spread across the space around, as if reality itself could not withstand the damage inflicted. And the illusory barrier falls apart with a crash, showering down in glittering fragments onto the cracked floor. The comrades, barely able to stand on their feet, freeze in shock, realizing that they had been fighting ghosts all this time. The squad leader looks around in bewilderment, barely having time to comprehend what happened. But the young man is calm. He walks through the dissipating fog, explaining the enemy's plan as he goes. The exhausted soldiers cannot believe that their most difficult battle turned out to be just a carefully prepared trap. The man's glasses gleam with amazement as he realizes how deeply the boy sees into the essence of what is happening. The young man merely casually holds his hands in his pockets, summing up the results of the fight with absolute confidence. There is not a shadow of fear on his face, only cold calculation and a clear understanding of the next step. The man freezes, amazed at how easily this young warrior holds his ground in the midst of mortal danger. Indifferently waving goodbye, the guy turns around and walks into the darkness of the corridor. Left without his support, the squad slowly moves forward, trying their best to help their wounded comrades. A seasoned leader decides not to hesitate and uses his magic to light the way and keep the group safe. Every movement is a huge challenge for the fighters, as their strength is almost exhausted. Concentrating the remaining energy in his palm, the man calls upon the healing light, and a warm, shining circle unfolds on the earth, giving the exhausted warriors long-awaited hope and respite. But ahead of them, giant gates, covered with hundreds of terrifying skulls, were already waiting. Catching their breath, the exhausted squad realizes that there is no turning back. Understanding the full responsibility, the man makes the difficult decision to move on. With a deafening roar, the heavy doors give way, opening the way into the unknown. And as soon as the red light fills the passage, what you see inside takes your breath away. On the stone floor, with their heads bowed, stood the terrifying warriors of stone and metal. In the center of the hall, a giant knight knelt, thrusting his sword into the frozen slab. The faces of the wounded show undisguised fear from the realization of the impending danger. After all, behind the back of the first guard, there are dozens of exactly the same idols. Stepping over the threshold, the hunters freeze before the unprecedented scale of the ancient temple. At the same moment, ominous flames flare up along the walls and the eye sockets of the skulls. The space is illuminated by rows of statues with mystical glowing halos. And above the heads of the uninvited guests, a giant amphitheater and looming weapons loom. Sharp blades hung on chains, ready to fall down at any moment. A whole army, lined up in an even formation, stretches out before the wounded warriors. Seized by a primal fear, the boys are unable to tear their eyes away from the summit. Indeed, at the very end of the hall, on a high pedestal, rises a monumental throne. From the depths of the ruler's helmet, a scarlet light bursts forth, burning through the souls of the guests. And the lord of the dungeon himself appears before them in all his terrible and crushing grandeur.